In Video Game Podcast. Me and Daz are back. Daz, how are you doing?
I'm very good, Mr. Dursley. I keep calling you Mr. Durs, or my girlfriend thinks it's kinky. How you doing yourself? You alright?
I am doing very well, Daz. Very well. Have you got a kinky name that I should call you?
You know what? If you're more kinky,
What's
you make one for me.
I'll have a think about that. We've got a lot to talk about today, and but I will have a think about that and come up with a kinky name for you for next time. We can call ourselves by our kinky names next time.
Yeah, we can make little cartoon avatars for our Facebook page and things like that as well, man.
Absolutely. So, what have you been playing this week? You know, you had your birthday and all that stuff. Did you get much time to play anything, or?
Well, for anyone who's been following, I completed Sekiro.
He did it.
I bloody did it.
After we talked about it last week, so this is good. Yeah. How did it go? How many attempts were there on that boss?
It took me probably about 14, 15 attempts, I'd say. It was one session.
And not bad, is it?
It's pretty decent.
For a final boss, I think that's pretty good going.
I spent the first few times literally doing nothing but block. So just to, because you can sort of what's the word I'm looking for? You can deflect their attacks in Sekiro, can't you? So I just spent most of the time trying to learn the timings of deflecting the attacks and things like that. Because obviously the more you deflect, the less damage you take, right? So yeah, I did that for the first few times, just learning like move sets, patterns, things like that, and that really helped.
So what is it? Is it a spoiler if you tell me what the final boss what is? Is that a spoiler to players? Should we not discuss that?
It is pretty big plot spoiler.
Okay, let's not go there. But you managed to defeat it, so that's what you've spent your week playing, is it? Or did you move on after that?
No, I've been working quite a lot this week, and doing little bits for work outside of my work hours as well. So I've not had time to pick up anything new this week, but I did complete Sekiro, so
that's good. Well, you know, life happens, and you managed to complete. So what's next on your list?
So after the research that we've done this week
for some series.
I
don't know why we leave this as like a big reveal. It's literally the title of the podcast.
Yeah, I've made a poster. Yeah, it's all over social media.
Such a surprise.
I'm gonna say it, Durs. I'm gonna say it. I want to replay this series.
Oh wow! From the start.
From the start, I literally in going back through everything. And like reminding myself of everything, I've kind of fallen in love with it a little bit more.
Are you going to play the remakes or are you going to play the originals or both? Because this is one of the rare times when a series has terrific remakes.
Yeah, I think
you can kind of get away with both. You know, often they do remakes and they're just awful. This series has got a very good track record with remakes.
Yeah, part of me really wants to do the originals first and then play the remakes again.
Sure.
So yeah, I think that's the way I'm going to play it.
They're perfectly playable.
Oh,
so, yeah. I downloaded because Epic Mega Games, who I never tend to buy games from, I have an Epic account purely because they have they constantly give away free games. So I just constantly download their free games and never install any, never buy anything. But they had the Outer Worlds on sale last week, and also for I don't know why they also gave me a £10 off voucher. So I ended up getting the Outer Worlds for about £20, which I thought was a good deal.
That's decent.
Yeah, so I've been playing through that, and it's really fun. I'm really enjoying it. It's pretty much just Fallout New Vegas in space, as you'd expect. It's the same developers and all of that. Really, seemingly so far, I mean, I'm quite early in, but it seems really well written so far, really humorous in places. It's got a real nice kind of space western thing going on, which I'm really enjoying. I kind of like that aesthetic and that kind of that genre in film. So it's quite nice to kind of play that kind of space cowboy in game. It's been really fun so far. It looks gorgeous as well. The character models are really expressive when they're talking, which really helps for an RPG, I think, when you're kind of interacting with characters. It's great. I love there's some really good moral choices so far. You know, it's really good. And then aside from that, I don't know why, but when I've decided to, chill out after a long day's work, I've been lying down on the bed and playing Super Meat Boy until my hands don't work anymore.
My dude, how are you finding it?
Oh, I love Super Meat Boy. I played the hell out of Super Meat Boy when it first came out.
Yeah.
I played it on Steam to death, but I got it on Xbox 360, and I haven't played it for years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I picked it up for the 360 because I thought it's something I quite like playing just when I'm chilling out.
Yeah.
So I got it for the 360 and I've been playing through it, and oh man, it's so much fun, but it's so tough.
Yeah.
The fun thing is, though, as difficult as it is, and I guess at some point we'll get to platformers and we'll get to indie games and we'll probably talk about this.
Hmm.
But the thing I love about it is that it's kind of the same way I see Street Fighter 2. Actually, it's ludicrously difficult, and I am rubbish at it. In some places, I'm better at Super Meat Boy than I am Street Fighter 2. But the principle still stands. Even when I'm sucking at a level and I'm replaying and replaying, and I just can't beat the level, or in Street Fighter 2's case, can't beat the boss. It's always the sign of a really good game that I don't get frustrated with it, and I'm just like, fine. I'm not good at it, but it's fine. And I know that it's not cheap, and it's not a cheap death. It's not cheaping me out. I can do this. I just need to figure out how.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I find myself getting to a point where I'm like, right, okay, I'll just do this one more time. No, I'll just try it one more time. No, I'll just try it one more time. And that goes on for like hours. I'll just keep going until I get that level done. Yeah, I love Super Meat Boy. So I've been playing that, but my fingers, man, they're not what they used to be. The old arthritis is causing issues. So
I find a very similar thing. So Super Meat Boy is close to my heart anyway.
Is it? I didn't know that. That's cool.
I mean, I do want a fully grown Meat Boy. Binding of Isaac, you can grow him from a cube of meat, basically. So I want a full.
I love that, like so many of those indie games have crossover characters.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, that's the thing with all of the Ed McMillan stuff. So Super Meat Boy, going back a bit further, you've got Gish. All of those characters sort of tend to come into the Binding of Isaac either as NPC type. What am I trying to say? Like buddies that sort of help you out, or as bosses. So
cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
For me, like Isaac was the first, and I went back to Super Meat Boy.
Super Meat Boy was the first for me.
But I loved it, man. It gives me that same thing that I get on like super expert Super Mario Maker levels.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, although it's obviously very different in its gameplay. It just reminds me of the same kind of feel I used to get playing like Mega Man 2, Mega Man 3.
Yeah.
Just from a difficulty standpoint.
Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely love Super Meat Boy. Great game. I've been having a lot of fun playing it.
Right, platformers needs to go on the list for.
I thought it was on the list. Did it fall off the list?
Did I miss it when I made the?
I don't know. It was on the list last week, I think.
Yeah, I am but a human man. I may have just forgot to put it on the list. But yeah, let's make sure it's on there for next week.
So I have got a cup of tea and I'm ready to go. I am good to go. What are we looking at this week?
So this week, we are looking at the Resident Evil games / extended universe slightly.
We talked about Resident Evil during the Horror Games podcast, the first Icons of Sin podcast. We talked about Resident Evil, and I thought we might be done for at least a while, but they dragged us back in. The poll has spoken, and Resident Evil Deep Dive was the way to go.
Oh no, what a shame.
Oh no, what a shame. Yes, because we both can't stand this series.
I know.
So you have done extensive research into the history of Resident Evil. So from a story perspective, take us up to, I guess, Resident Evil 0, and then we'll start with the games, and then we'll kind of go back to the history as we go.
That sounds like a good idea.
Tell me all about it, because I don't think I know a lot of this. I mean, I used to read all of the documents and stuff, because I'm like that. I guess like the RPG player in me, like if I get documents in games, I have to read them. So I have read a lot of that, but you were saying some stuff earlier off air that I was like, oh wow, I didn't know that. So go for it. The history of Resident Evil.
No worries. So we are starting in 1966 with Dr. Spencer, who's a recurring character in the game.
Yes.
and James Marcus, who is also a very vital character in the games. And they travel to somewhere called the Stairway of the Sun in West Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And there is basically what you've got. It's like a baby pyramid, the Stairway to the Sun. So it's in this like
Right.
lush area full of greenery and stuff like that. But there's this one plant that sits on top of this tiny little pyramid
Mm-hmm.
that they take.
That sounds like this sounds either like they're going to become Batman or something horrible is going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. So they don't become Batman. Spoilers. The basically the flower itself contains the progenitor virus.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, taking that is the very, very first steps in making the T virus exist. So the progenitor virus comes from a flower in West Africa.
Mm-hmm. And we'll be getting back to Africa a lot later in this series.
We will indeed, and not by Toto.
Sadly not.
Dun, 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 so basically what they do then, they've got this flower, they do research, they start researching on it, and they realize that it has these bodies, this virus lives within this flower. So they start Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. Umbrella, obviously a very big name in the series.
It is indeed, yes.
And they started as Umbrella Pharmaceuticals as a front for the research they're doing.
Yeah, so they were an evil corporation from the start.
Oh yeah. So they set up base in the Arklay Mountains, which we will be back to.
We will indeed.
Come Resident Evil 0, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they booby trap a mansion. This may sound familiar, to keep intruders away.
Yes, in the most bonkers fashion, and as only Japanese storytelling can do.
Absolutely. So while they're going through all this research, they actually start running out of money quite sharpish. So at this point, you've got Spencer, you've got Marcus, and you've got somebody called Edward Ashford.
Mm-hmm.
Another name that will come up soon. And they are all working to create, separately, using their own money, they're working to create 3 different strains of the virus to sell as bioorganic weaponry.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the aim is to sell that to the US military as the T-Virus Project. So at this point, it's still 1966. The T-Virus Project has begun.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, come 1968, so a couple of years down the line, they've been working on this. Edward Ashford, whilst working on the virus, actually gets infected with progenitor virus from the plant.
Damn.
And passes away.
Oh, so dear.
One of the 3 sort of the 3 scientists right at the very beginning there is gone already, and we're nowhere near the games. We are currently
we're in 1966.
We're 30 years before Resident Evil. Yeah. So he dies. And basically Alexander, his son, Alexander Ashford, inherits his work, his research, but he's more a fan of genetics and starts cloning.
Right.
Hence Code Veronica, which we'll come back to later.
Which we will definitely come back to later on.
Yeah. So a few years down the line, and Alexander, by 1971, he has now created Alexia and Alfred Ashford.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who, anybody who's played Code Veronica will know that twin clones and very big parts of Code Veronica.
They are indeed.
James Marcus, literally about 12 years after originally finding the Stairway to the Sun and the flower, 1978, James Marcus actually completes development of the T-Virus.
Mm-hmm.
So it took 12 years. Basically, what happens with the T-Virus is rather than dying, anyone infected with it hosts will become flesh-eating zombies.
Yeah, the traditional classic zombies that we see in Resident Evil.
Yeah, so the T-Virus is the big bad of how the game starts, really, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I know we go into different types of virus, like the G-Virus, and then you've got different types of programs that they run.
Yeah.
But the T-Virus it's stage 1.
Yes.
It's what gets the mass population as they become. So at this point, now that he's got this virus and it works, he hires 2 people. So he hires Birkin and Wesker. both again very important names.
They are indeed.
So you got Albert Wesker and William Birkin.
Mm-hmm.
William Birkin is a scientist himself. Wesker is more of a sort of mercenary type.
Yes.
He can get his head around the science a little bit, but he's more sort of the muscle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of the operation. So they start working together. Come 1981, at age 10, Alexia Ashford, who we talked about earlier, is one of the clone twins.
One of the clones, yeah.
She actually becomes head scientist of the facility in Antarctica,
because she's just that intelligent.
Yeah. So obviously it's run by Alexander, who is, in essence, they see him as their father currently, unaware that they're clones. And he makes her the head scientist of the facility in the Antarctic. That runs well for 2 years until trouble. So they find that the siblings find out that they are twins.
They just didn't realize that they almost looked the same.
The word I was looking for there is clones. They know they're twins. Sorry. Just a little fourth wall. It's 8:33 a.m.
It is. It's early in the morning. We record these like first thing in the morning. So
they find out they're clones and they turn against Alexander and they begin experimenting on him. So Alexia combines what they've now found, which is a P virus, with genes from a queen ant, and injects it.
Sensible.
She injects it directly into Alexander. Alexander morphs into a monster, a boss. You might think of him as.
The standard Resident Evil style boss. Yes.
Yeah. Nosferatu. So Nosferatu is Alexander, because Alexia, combines those, the P virus genes from Queen Ant, and then she injects herself with it and puts herself into a 15-year cryostasis.
And we will get back to her in Code Veronica.
You will. So Alfred, her brother, basically oversees her. He becomes her guardian while she sleeps, and we'll stop there for a little while on the Veronica arc. So spring into 1988, we're back with James Marcus.
Yes.
And he is working on the Queen Leech. Okay. And then he's assassinated by the Umbrella Security Services under order from Spencer. So his partner early on has now hired him.
Assassinated him.
So basically, Wesker and Birkin are the ones who go ahead with the assassination. They lead that.
Sons of bitches.
I know, right? What's that all about? So Wesker and Birkin have killed Marcus. Yeah. They basically take him, Queen Leech, and discard of them, get rid of them, so nobody knows where they are or what's going on. Nobody ever knows of Queen Leech in this case. And Birkin is actually then credited with creating the T virus with all of Marcus's research. So that it's a backstabby, let's make Birkin the scientist, the guy who did all this.
Yeah.
And at that point, Birkin begins working on the T2 Tyrant. So the Tyrant, if anyone who's aware of the game, Tyrants are kind of like big bosses. They're humanoid. They've still got their minds in certain elements and things like that, whereas your normal T-virus zombie is crazed and has no thought process other than eat.
Yeah, they're slightly more intelligent, a lot bigger, and a lot more dangerous.
Yeah. So this is where, for me, it's very interesting, because while Birkin's working on the T2, the Tyrant, at the same time in Europe, Umbrella Europe is actually creating the Nemesis Alpha. Yeah. So you've got the Tyrants and the Nemesis program running side by side
simultaneously
on two different continents. It's actually got to that point over where we are now. It's like 22 years where now it's like an international race.
Yes.
To get things running. And let's be honest, when you're working with military biological warfare, racing is probably not a good way of doing things.
It's probably not too sensible.
Yeah. No. So Birkin manages to get his hands off screen on the Nemesis strain, and through that, in 1991, discovers the G virus, which actually lets the host repair dead cells. So this is where, when we step into movies, we'll be talking about Alice a little bit.
We will.
When we talk a little bit more about Wesker, we'll be able to touch on that as well. And then Spencer basically taking this massive success from Birkin, super impressed. He's like, you know what, Birkin, son? Because at this point he sees him as more of a son. He's like, let me build you the hive. Basically, he's like, I'm going to build you this massive facility. I'm going to put it under the mansion, and that facility,
nothing will ever go wrong.
Yeah, exactly. That facility is our very well known and very well loved hive. So that leads us up to. That's basically everything that happens that could go wrong or is developed
during that time.
Yeah, prior to Resident Evil 0 in the story. So that is where I will stop.
So, do we cover? I think we should cover Resident Evil 0 when we get to it in the games. Yeah. So let's start with Resident Evil. A series of bizarre murders occur on the outskirts of Raccoon City, and looks like it might be cannibals. So the Raccoon Police Department, their Special Tactics and Rescue Service, STARS, are assigned to investigate the murders. They're divided into two teams, Alpha and Bravo. Bravo is sent in first, Resident Evil 0, and Alpha follow afterwards to investigate Bravo's disappearance. So in Resident Evil, we play as Chris and Jill.
We do.
And basically, shortly upon arriving at the mansion via helicopter during a tremendously cheesy cutscene, our protagonists are chased by seemingly rabid dogs into the mansion, where they some of them get killed in the on the mansion grounds. Some of them make it into the mansion, and there we are, barricaded into the Spencer mansion, where the game begins.
Yeah.
So, this was originally called Biohazard in Japan. It was renamed Resident Evil because there's actually a DOS game called Biohazard that was already around in the US and Europe, and they were worried about copyright. I don't think I've ever even played or heard of Biohazard the game until I read this, so they probably could have got away with it. But in any case, it's called Resident Evil over here. I'm not sure which I prefer. Do you prefer Biohazard or Resident Evil as a name? I quite like Biohazard. They're both cool.
Yeah, I mean, they are both cool. I like Biohazard, but Resident Evil for me, like it, I think it's just clinging on to the fact that franchise, it means something when you say Resident Evil.
Sure.
So yeah, clinging on to that, I like it as it is. Does.
Fair enough. So this game was originally conceived as a Super Nintendo game back in 1993, and then it was going to be a 3D first-person PlayStation game. And then eventually that didn't happen, and we ended up with what we got, which is Resident Evil, a third-person game with pre-rendered CG backdrops and static cameras. So what was your first experience of this? You started with the PlayStation 2, didn't you? And then you went back to PlayStation 1 games after.
That's right, yeah.
So what were your first impressions upon entering the Spencer Mansion?
I was when we were in the mansion, I forgot it was going to happen, first of all, because the bit at the start's quite lengthy anyway. Takes a little while to get in the mansion. I forgot that was the thing, and immediately when I got into the mansion, I was like, oh no, those bloody dogs. Because I'd been told there was a thing that happens with some dogs in a mansion, and and to be prepared. So I was like, oh, the dogs. Oh, I'm gonna actually. This is gonna actually frighten me, isn't it? But I kind of, where it comes to your characters, so Chris and Jill for me were like early favorites. When you see Chris and Jill together,
yeah,
it makes me feel a little bit happy inside, and it always
has, doesn't it? It's there are original duo.
Yeah,
Whenever I think Resident Evil, although I personally prefer Resident Evil 2 over Resident Evil, I always think of Chris and Jill. Those are like
Yeah.
they're the protagonists for me.
Yes. Game Jill is a great character.
She is, yeah.
Just specifying Game Jill. There, we'll come back to
movie Jill will come later
yeah.
on. So this game kind of, I mean, it wasn't the first survival horror game by any stretch of the imagination, but it kind of defined what survival horror would be going forward.
Yes.
It took quite a lot from games like Alone in the Dark.
Yes.
But generally, it kind of almost reinvented and certainly popularized the survival horror genre. So this game pretty much you play as two different characters, both on separate discs on the original game. And you basically play through the mansion. You're trapped in the mansion, and you're trying to find Bravo Team. That's pretty much all the story we really need to give. Apart from obviously, we know that there is we know now in hindsight, we didn't at the time, but we know now that there is the hive under the Spencer Mansion, and we'll end up going into those labs and into all of that as we progress through the game. Obviously, this game introduced a lot of things that would stay with the series throughout the series. So we started here with typewriters, which I think is a tremendous mechanic in the game. It basically limits the number of saves you can have. So you start with ink ribbons, basically. You only have ink ribbons, and I think you only start with one to begin with. You can collect ink ribbons, but basically ink ribbons are saves, and you can only save when you find a typewriter. I'm not sure if that was an intentional choice for the sake of the horror, or whether that was a choice they had to make in order to make the game work, because you may not be able to save in every point in the game. I'm not entirely sure. And it also introduces the tank controls. So the tank controls are probably quite archaic and awkward to see these days. But because we have the static cameras, so in order to make Resident Evil look as good as it did on the PlayStation 1, they basically couldn't do what they ended up doing if they did it properly. So instead of actually building the backgrounds that you see in Resident Evil and then having the characters in that location interacting with that real environment, they created the environments as a CG cutscene, effectively. So they're basically CG cutscenes that they then place the characters in. This allowed them to have this almost photoreal looking areas, or well, not photoreal, but in incredibly detailed looking areas throughout the game that you're in. But basically they're all just CG cutscenes. They're pre-rendered areas. But because of that, they obviously needed to use the static camera, which wasn't such an issue, because I think that, for me, is a massive part of survival horror. I think it adds to the horror. So you as a result, end up with these tank controls, which basically, when you're, it's hard to describe, isn't it? It's really hard to describe tank controls unless you've played them. But basically, forward is forward in the screen. Forward will move your character forward from the angle you're currently looking at the character.
Yes.
And will continue doing so in the next screen if you're still pressing forward. However, when you stop pressing forward and press forward again, they may head in a different direction depending on what the camera angle was doing at the time. So it's a little clunky and it's a little hard to explain, but I kind of love the tank controls. And
I agree.
I think, although I don't think it was intentionally done to make the game more scary, I think it makes the old survival horror games far more scary.
Oh yeah, definitely. Because certain angles, it's like being on a ghost train.
It is, exactly, and it is. Yeah, you're right. It is absolutely.
Yeah. So it's like, just to clarify on that a little more for anyone who doesn't quite get what I'm saying there. So if you're going down like a narrow corridor in a horror game, and there might be these, maybe windows to your right.
Yeah.
And basically the tank system means that you have to hold forward to go down that corridor.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you sort of reverse yourself, and that will flip everything, and all you can do is go backwards. So there's no You know what I
And
mean?
you can guarantee that when something scares you in that game, you will press the wrong direction and it will just go all wrong for you. Everyone's
Yep.
done it. Everyone's
Yep.
done it. And at the time you're like, oh no, God. But it's part of the fear. I love it. I actually
Yeah.
love tank controls. I think
Yeah.
they're great. I wouldn't change them in the original games for anything.
Yeah.
And in
So
fact, we'll get to that with the Resident Evil remake actually later.
yeah. So with Resident Evil, should we have a look at our first plot twist?
The plot twist, go for it.
Our first big plot twist. So obviously, Alpha Team, when they were deployed with a leader named Albert Wesker.
Yes.
That's a name that you've already heard
Hmm.
a couple of times in this podcast already, if
Yep.
you remember. So he is actually the mercenary type that is working under Dr. Spencer. So he works for Umbrella,
Yes.
and he is working now as a double agent, searching the mansion for any incriminating evidence to get it destroyed. And well, apart from some of the research which he keeps for himself, we'll come back to that quite a bit later. Yeah, and he is found out by Stars to
Yeah.
be a double agent. So that's our first big twist. And he kind of becomes the big bad for the game for a little while then, doesn't he?
Well, for the series, really,
Mm.
for the most part. I mean,
Yeah.
there comes a point in these games when you're like, they kind of get to the point where like, oh, Wesker's here, and it is meant to be like a big shock, and it's really not a shock by the end because Wesker's pretty much always in these games at some point.
Oh yeah, yeah. Same with the entire universe. I mean, he's probably the most consistent game to movie translation as well.
He is,
Out of
isn't he?
all of the
Yeah.
characters. Yeah, I think he's the one where you watch it, like you don't need to know it's him to know
No,
it's him, if you know
he's
what I
just
mean.
a dickhead wearing sunglasses indoors. That's Wesker.
Yeah. It's gotta be right. Slick back hair, sunglasses.
Yeah, exactly. Slick back blonde hair, sunglasses, done.
But yeah, so he's found out and actually releases the first sort of monster boss of the
Yes, the
game
tyrant.
to what you would assume was his own detriment. So he awakens and releases the tyrant and is immediately killed by it.
Yep.
Um,
Which was a shocking moment.
it was. It was like, oh, okay. That's weird. He's been killed by it, but what we don't know at this point, he's actually already injected a prototype of the G virus, which is one that comes up a lot later, where it's more of a regenerative and kind of gives you superpowers as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So he was given that by Birkin before he went in. So yeah, he's already injected that as a sort of like a failsafe.
Mm-hmm.
Lucky he did for his sake and for the series. For the series as well, because I think as recurring antagonists go, I think Wesker's the best. But yeah, so we now have the Tyrant, the T2 Tyrant, not to be confused with T1000, the Terminator in T2 Judgment Day. But yeah, it's now running amok, trying to kill our characters, Chris and Joel.
Yes.
Yeah, over to you, Durs.
I thought the Tyrant was a terrifying character, and I was a little ill prepared for it the first time I played through, to be honest. In terms of inventory management, which is a big part of the Resident Evil games. Again, you have your very limited inventory that you can carry with you. Most of the Resident Evil games, though not all, had like item storage crates where you can store things, and they're kind of magical crates because they teleport things to different crates. But basically, you have a very limited inventory, and by the time I got to Tyrant, I wasn't quite prepared the first time around, but I managed it. So
yeah, I feel that one, man.
So, what was your first thoughts upon seeing the Tyrant? Did you think you were fucked?
I've got this thing, and when I see something that's absolutely disgusting looking,
and it was back then.
Yeah,
it's not now. Now it's laughable,
yeah.
But back then it was pretty shocking. Yeah,
I got this thing when I first see something coming at me that's absolutely disgusting looking. This is not a real life thing. This is based on horror games. This is horror games, all right? Don't take this as my personality outside of gaming, all right? Well, I don't talk about people that way, but yeah, when I see something disgusting coming towards me in a game, I immediately shut myself because I'm like, all right, they've made this thing really, really ugly. and it's bigger than anything else I've seen so far. I'm not prepared for this, and yeah, I had a little bit of a moment with where my stomach went a little weird, and I felt like I needed to change my underwear. But I love the tyrants. I
I
do.
love the tyrant. You know, your moment of shitting yourself, which I kind of did a little with the tyrant, because like I said, I wasn't really well enough prepared. But one enemy in Resident Evil that I wasn't prepared enough for at all, because I just, for some reason, when I played for it the first time, I didn't see it coming.
Yeah.
I think when I saw it in my friend's house, they'd got past that point, so I didn't see it. But
Oh.
the giant snake, the giant snake got me. I was
Yeah.
not prepared for that at all, and then there was the panic, and
I nearly forgot about the giant snake.
yeah,
Yeah.
the snake got me.
Yeah. When I look at Resident Evil, I never think of that snake as the first thing that comes to my mind. It's always like you got your tyrants, you got your nemesis, you got Wesker. Those are the big bad for me. It's like, but yeah, the big snake is a bit of a
Yeah, you got to give some love to the big snake. Come on,
yeah.
there's a soundbite for you.
Yeah, give some love to the big snake
Absolutely.
with Daz and Durs, the Icons of Sin podcast.
Okay. That could be your sexy name. I'll just call you Big Snake from now on.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. So we cannot move on. Well, actually, first let's stick with. This is all good, but let's stick with the seriously good. Because we've got static camera angles, you have a problem. You walk around a corner and you walk straight into an enemy.
Yes.
The game very cleverly manages to avoid that in most situations. Every enemy in this game has audio cues that you can listen out for. So if there is an enemy off screen and you're listening and paying attention, pretty much all the time you will be able to tell that there is an enemy. So it kind of fixes any issues you may have with the tank controls. You have to play this game sensibly. You can't run while shooting, which is another staple of the early Resident Evil games.
Yeah.
And you really need to be careful. That's the whole point of this survival horror thing. You don't just rush around because it won't work for you. Also, this game has an incredible soundtrack. I remember being blown away by this soundtrack back in the day.
Yeah, man, like
it's really atmospheric and it really suits every scene that it's in.
Yeah, I mean, was it 96 the game actually came out, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, for 96, it's like, well, it's great.
I mean, again, it's the CD audio, isn't it? It's like we've got CDs now. We can do proper audio. I know we touched on that with Final Fantasy VII in the RPG episode. So yeah, wonderful stuff. I need to talk about though it's brilliant but terrible voice acting in this game. I mean,
can you do me an impression?
Oh, I don't know if I can.
Go on.
Barry, where's Barry? There you go. That's my attempt.
Yeah, that works.
The acting, the voice acting. I don't know where they got these people. I'm assuming it was just members of the team. Like, you know, they must have had some, or I guess maybe they just used whatever American actors they could find to do voices. Yeah. I don't know, but it's hilariously bad, and it just adds to the charm, to be honest. And in 1996, I didn't care.
No, I mean, I played through the Final Fantasy series, so voice acting for me isn't really a big deal at this point.
Yeah. But yeah, really funny voice acting. Yeah. So, Chris and or Jill defeat the tyrant.
Or Jill.
They escape.
They do.
What happens next?
Can I leave you on a big boom?
Go for it. Leave me on a big boom, and we'll immediately come back.
Boom. Bye mansion.
Yeah.
There it is.
It's gone. The mansion is gone.
Yeah. In what was at the time very nice fire effects.
It was. I mean, this game was
kind of like
for its time. Absolutely
it was like rolling fire.
Yeah.
Like very good.
So we then move on. There was a different version of Resident Evil 2, which was completely ditched. Pretty much almost finished version of Resident Evil 2. that they completely ditched, took some of the assets obviously from, and remade what we know as Resident Evil 2. That original version, I believe, is available. I think modders have actually fixed it to where you can play the original version of Resident Evil 2. They've kind of patched some of the holes because it was that complete. It was pretty much a complete game. So I think if you search around online, you can probably find the original Resident Evil 2 that fans have modded to kind of patch the holes that they had, missing assets, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And you can play the original Resident Evil 2. I have not. Canonically, though, Resident Evil 2, September 29th, 1998, 2 months after the events of Resident Evil, most citizens of the Midwestern American mountain community, Raccoon City, thanks Wikipedia, have been transformed into zombies by the T-virus, a biological weapon secretly developed by those bastards in Umbrella.
Yes.
We are introduced to Leon Kennedy, a police officer on his first day of duty, and Claire Redfield, a college student looking for her brother, Chris, who we know for Resident Evil.
We do indeed.
Both of them, on, other ends of the city, end up making their way to the Raccoon Police Department and must escape the city.
Mm-hmm.
What were your first impressions of Resident Evil 2? I think I talked on the horror podcast about how much the opening cinematic means to me.
Yeah.
It was one of the most incredible cinematics I've ever seen. It was amazing. It got me so hyped for this game. Way more hyped than I was expecting to be. So what were your first impressions of Resident Evil 2?
So I've got two aspects of it that spring to mind. So first of all, I remember thinking, wow, what a step up.
Absolutely.
From Resident Evil to Resident Evil 2, you can really tell that money came into the equation a bit more. I think
the scale of Raccoon City, it feels so much bigger than the first game.
Yeah, it's amazing. And obviously Claire being the sister of Chris, nice tie-in to the original there. You're like, oh, cool. So maybe we see Chris again. Maybe we don't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I fell in love with Leon as a character from the very beginning. Me too. Like, Leon, I think, is still my favorite protagonist of the game.
I 100% agree. Leon is my absolute favorite protagonist of the game. Like I said, funnily enough, when you say Resident Evil, I think of Chris and Jill.
Yeah.
But Leon is definitely my favorite character.
Yeah, and then you got some batshit stuff that starts to happen in 2 as well,
Oh, yes.
We'll come to that as we go through the plot a little bit, but I mean, the main sort of storyline of 2, when you're looking at, let's take Birkin, for example.
Yeah.
And how his story goes throughout this game and those affected by him, like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
But it's awesome.
It is an incredible, incredible game. And I will say, touching on the last point I made on Resident Evil, still not, it's not up to today's standards, but as you said, you can tell the budget, and you can tell the budget in the scale of the game, the improved graphics of the game, but more than anything else, where the money shows is the voice acting. The voice acting is night and day better in this game than it is to Resident Evil. Still not great by today's standards. I mean, we get real professional voice actors and stuff these days, but for the time, it was pretty good.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So it basically, to do my impression, it goes from "Hey Barry," to "Hey Barry."
Yeah, it's leaps and bounds better.
Yes, I will agree with you there wholeheartedly. So, just to go a little more in depth of how Raccoon City has now been infested or started to be infested. Going from the Arklay Mountains, where we had basically the whole start of Resident Evil in the Arklay Mountains, which is where the mansion is, and
the training facility and all of that. The
training facility, the hive, everything. Basically, it's rats that carry the G virus down into Raccoon City.
Yep.
So it is actually rabid rats or zombie rats who start infesting the populace of Raccoon City.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how it gets there. So you basically, with Leon or Claire, on the day of the outbreak, you begin your journey through and out of Raccoon City, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah. And it's tremendous. Opening in the city just felt so different from Resident Evil. You know, Resident Evil was all tight corridors and hallways, and other than that main hub area,
Yeah.
the staircase of the mansion, the front door. Other than that, it was all very tight hallways and small areas. And to an extent, Resident Evil 2 is as well, but it does a great job of putting us straight into the action in the middle of the city, and it immediately feels bigger for it. And I also loved that we'd done everything in Resident Evil, and it would have been so easy for them just to make another Resident Evil game in another mansion somewhere else and just made the same game again. What I like about this is that it feels like a true sequel. We get to see the results of Umbrella's tampering during Resident Evil.
Yeah.
We get to see that it's now infested the whole town.
Yeah.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, absolutely. We have progression, which is what you really want in your sequels.
Yeah.
And I'll say that going forward, like, you know, obviously we step backwards in time a little bit with certain titles, but I mean for the main sort of storyline going forward, I think they do a very good job of stepping that across, and there's always an evolution to the situation when you go into a new title, which
absolutely.
I really respect them for doing that. It's, you know, it would be so easy to be stuck in your ways with it, but they've always gone, oh, what if this happens now? You know, and researching the full story of you know, the plot lines of everything again, I've realized how in depth the story actually is. You know, like, I'm older and I can take that sort of information on a bit better now. You know, and
sure.
They definitely put a lot into it mentally.
It really shows.
Oh yeah, the writing's fantastic.
For me, this is the perfect sequel. This improved everything.
Yes.
It improved on everything from Resident Evil.
Yeah.
On every level. This is the perfect sequel. It's my favorite Resident Evil game.
It is also my favorite Resident Evil game.
Yeah. I played through this version about 4 years ago, and I still found it great fun. I thought it was great. I think it's held up tremendously well given its age. As long as you can get used to the tank controls. Obviously, that's a deal breaker. If you can't get used to the tank controls, it's probably not going to be for you. But I can't recommend this one enough. One thing I didn't touch on, actually, before we move on, excuse me, was the way the characters play through the levels, which I really liked. It was a subtle touch that I don't remember from Resident Evil. And correct me if I'm wrong, because it may have been the same in Resident Evil, but I only really noticed it in Resident Evil 2. In Resident Evil 2, much like Resident Evil 1, you're playing as two characters. You're playing as Claire and you're playing as Leon.
Yes.
If you play through the game as Claire, for example, and you pick up certain items, those items will not be available when you play through later as Chris.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great touch to the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because some things seem to be happening at the same time, and it's kind of weird. But I did like that touch that, you know, they're going through the level, and if someone takes that item, certain items, not all items, but take some items, they won't be there then when you play through your second playthrough with the other character. I like that.
Yeah, I thought it was a really cool touch. Can be frustrating.
I mean, you'll only make that mistake once.
Yeah. So should we talk about Birkin and Sherry?
Yeah, continue on with the lore.
Okay, so Dr. William Birkin, we all remember him. Behind the scenes, so to speak, he's become fed up, basically. So he's never been, you know, in his years of helping Spencer, he's never been promoted to an executive position, which is what he really wanted. So basically, he agrees to hand himself and his research over to the military. Umbrella get to him first, as their Umbrella, of course.
Yeah.
So they basically unleash probably about 100 machine gun bullets on him. And as he's dying, he injects himself with the G virus.
very quickly.
Yes. And he becomes... What would you call him, Durs? He's like an eyeball... He's got like a big eyeball on his arm. He's basically... He's like...
Yeah, he's just a real mess.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call him. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's just that kind of design style that Resident Evil does so well.
Yeah.
That kind of you lose. You've got no uniformity. It's just a weird mass of human. I don't know. It's so hard to explain.
It's very strange, isn't it? It's like the Tyrant on steroids
with a massive eye.
Yeah, with a massive eye in his arm and Birkin's face.
Guess where you should shoot it.
Yeah.
Take a guess where you should shoot it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he transforms
in the big
into this. Maybe in the big eye.
Yeah.
That might be my bet.
So one little point we were talking about earlier, the rats that infested the city. One little point that I did miss out at that point was that the way that the rats become infested with the virus is during the fight. Birkin accidentally spills the virus into Raccoon City's water supply. So the rats are the first ones to take it in, but also over time, anyone not touched by the rats has been drinking the water. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Raccoon City basically it's just Umbrella's personal playground at this point. It's like, yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, so Birkin decides. Well, the virus side of him decides that it needs a fresh human host in order to continue to grow. But it also needs to be biologically compatible.
Yeah.
In comes Sherry Birkin, the daughter of William Birkin, who is a little girl.
Yeah.
I didn't quite get her age. I think she must be about 9-10 years old, right?
I would assume somewhere around there,
yeah. And Birkin is now roaming Raccoon City as this monstrosity, trying to find his daughter to impregnate her with the embryo of how do I say this? It's so weird, isn't it? It's basically it's a G virus embryo.
Yes.
That he is trying to put into his daughter.
Yes, his 9-10-year-old daughter.
This is where I say the plot gets a little batshit, but I love it.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it continues to do so.
Yeah. Luckily for Sherry, she does run into Leon and Claire.
Yes.
So that's always good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just wanted to get that bit in about Birkin and what he's actually planning on doing. Which is obviously being led by the evil side.
Yes, the virus seems almost like it has a will of its own.
Yes, and we haven't really seen that before, have we? We've seen people come back to life with nothing but the will to eat.
Yeah.
But it shows a lot more that the virus actually, when attached, it's almost like an evil AI.
Yeah, or almost like a parasite, which we'll get to in the later games. They kind of do the parasite thing, but it's almost like here, the virus itself is a parasite.
Yeah. Yeah. So Birkin.
Yes.
What a dude.
What a dude.
Yeah. So
and yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Look him up, guys.
Yeah.
Look him up, and you'll see what we mean. He's just a really weird, big eyeball on his shoulder monster.
I did want to put him in the poster, but I couldn't find an image of him that was...
Oh, really?
I could find images of him, but I couldn't find any transparent background images of him.
Oh, I see.
That were of good enough quality to match everything else on the poster, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it would have looked like really out of place. So I decided not to. But yeah, other than that, I would say check him out. He's probably one of the most fascinating looking characters in the game. Once he goes through that transformation, and he continues to get worse.
He does. Can we talk for a moment about this police station?
Of course we can. Let's do that.
Who the fuck made this police station? What the hell were they thinking?
Capcom.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the most. I mean, it's fine because it's Resident Evil, and Resident Evil does this. But when you stop to think,
Yeah.
this is the most insanely built police station ever made. I mean, it just like from a visual standpoint alone, it's crazy. And then when you get into everything else, it's mental. And of course, it has the obligatory, evil lab thing going on underneath. So
Yeah, as everything seems to do.
as everything seems to do in Raccoon City.
Yeah.
So, um, I think this is for me easily my favorite of all the Resident Evil games.
Yeah.
I don't want to peek too soon in this series, but I absolutely loved it. You get to the end and you're defeating the boss, and you get that time, the countdown start.
Yes.
How much did you panic?
I always panic in countdowns, man. I panicked
the first couple of times I played.
Mm-hmm.
I panicked.
Yeah.
And then eventually you realize you have got so much time.
Yeah.
Like so much time. You can take as long as you want to get out of that last level. But because there's the countdown, you just feel like, oh my God, panic.
Yeah.
Gives you loads of time.
So yeah, like it's weird. I panic at most things, to be honest, mate. But if you put a clock in front of me and it's going downwards to 0, I'm like, oh my God, I need to do it all now. Let's get out of here. Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, you do kind of like feel that panic is so good because you feel what the characters are supposed to be feeling, man. They're on a time limit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it does a really good job of sucking you in a little bit more. So this G virus embryo. Should I come back to that a little bit?
Sure, go for it.
So another character of the Birkin family is introduced. So you run into Annette Birkin.
Yes.
Who is the wife of William Birkin and mother of Sherry. And she helps you to develop a vaccine to stop the embryo inside Sherry. Now, let's skim a little forward and say, okay, they managed to subdue the virus.
Yes, yeah.
But not destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that comes up time and time again within this as well. It comes up a few times then where they can't quite kill the virus.
No.
In people for a lot of the story, but they can subdue it. They can slow it down.
Yes.
And that's what they're doing here with Sherry. So they slow it down and basically get her the hell out of Raccoon.
Mm-hmm.
To skim slightly. Sorry.
Yeah, well, we don't want to spoil the whole plot of these games and stuff like that. So I want people to enjoy the experience of playing through them.
Yeah, I think a big takeaway from Resident Evil 2 is, okay, it's still alive, but it's like for now we're okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good place to
leave Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's been subdued and we're okay. Unless they make a game that takes us 24 hours prior to the events of Resident Evil 2.
Dum dum dum.
Then we're in trouble. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis from 1999. This was, as far as I can tell, originally meant to be a spin-off.
Yeah.
With Code Veronica meant to be Resident Evil 3. Resident Evil 3 was originally going to be a Sega exclusive.
Mm-hmm.
But something changed. Not sure what. It may have been the Dreamcast's popularity, lack of popularity compared to the PlayStation. Who knows? Yeah. But in any case, originally there was meant to be a spin-off on PlayStation with the main games continuing on Sega consoles. That didn't happen. And Resident Evil Nemesis, which was originally made as a spin-off game, a very different kind of game, an action-orientated kind of game, which we will get to later in the series as well, was instead called Resident Evil 3. So Nemesis became Resident Evil 3 and Code Veronica became the spin-off. I think that's key because when you look at the two games, Resident Evil Code Veronica feels far more like Resident Evil 3 than Resident Evil 3 Nemesis does to me.
Yeah.
So in this game, you play as Jill.
You do.
We're back playing as Jill, and she attempts to escape Raccoon City. Most of the population, obviously, as we see in Resident Evil 2, has been transformed into zombies following the outbreak of the T-virus. And a new biological weapon secretly developed by Umbrella, I wonder what it could be called,
Dum dum dum,
is trying to track down and kill all the former STARS members, including Jill.
Yeah.
This creature is called Nemesis. And that's pretty much where we start off. So Nemesis is designed to kill all of the STARS members, the surviving STARS members who witnessed things, and basically anyone who is a witness to Umbrella's experiments.
Yeah, that's right. So
Nemesis, funnily enough, you mentioned the T-1000 earlier. Nemesis was actually inspired by the T-1000.
Was he?
He was.
Okay.
It was their feeling. They, I think, watching Terminator 2 and seeing the T-1000, wanted to create something that would make players paranoid that this thing would never stop. It would just always keep coming, like the T-1000 does. It's just kind of, emotionless, following you. They could have been inspired by the Terminator, but from what I've read, T-1000 was what really inspired them for Nemesis.
Okay, that's very interesting. So obviously, research on the Nemesis started in Europe. A lot of that research was taken and brought into our sort of Umbrella US world, where everything seems to be going tits up. So they deploy Nemesis. He finds Brad first of all, doesn't he? The pilot
Brad
from
Vickers.
Resident Evil. Yeah. So Brad, unfortunately, sorry that this is your only mention, Brad, but he bites the dust.
He does.
And then the next on Nemesis's radar is Jill Valentine,
who, for some reasons that are completely beyond me, having survived the horrors of the Spencer Mansion in Resident Evil, has decided to change her clothes into much less suitable attire.
Kind of weird. She reminds me in Nemesis, Jill, the way she's dressed reminds me of a character from Final Fantasy VIII called Eleni.
Okay.
Very similar in that sort of baby blue.
Right.
Yeah. Don't know why. Just always sort of drew that sort of comparison.
Yeah.
But she does face off initially with Nemesis.
She does, yes, several times.
Yeah, and initially she becomes infected.
She does.
She gets a little scratch. So where do we go from there, Durs? To the clock tower?
To the clock tower, yes. So she must get to the clock tower and escape Raccoon City. This is our until we get to other spin-off games. This is our last time in Raccoon City. Canonically, anyway.
Yeah.
What did you think of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis when you first played it?
When I first played it, I completed it, which was good for me back then.
It's a short game, actually.
Yeah.
Again, it was a spin-off.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Resident Evil 3. If I look at them in order now, or if I sort of rank them now, I think it definitely isn't the best Resident Evil game.
It's my least favorite of the first three.
Yes, yeah. Out of the first
but they're
three,
tremendous games, so that's not saying it's terrible.
Yeah.
For me, I think the biggest problem with Resident Evil 3 is the emphasis on action. I mean, I don't like my survival horror to be too action orientated, but more importantly than that, I don't think that the tank controls work very well with a more action orientated gameplay. And I think in this game, you get a lot of very seemingly cheap moments where Nemesis is just way too fast, and with tank controls, he's going to hit you.
Yeah.
You just can't avoid it, I think making it an action-orientated game more so than the other games kind of hurts this game a little bit for me.
Yeah. I kind of feel like the character in Nemesis, although terrifying...
Great. Yeah.
Although terrifying and an amazing antagonist, I think that he worked better in the movie.
Okay.
That's just my
Yeah,
very
yeah, no,
very
that's fair enough. Yeah.
I just find that the scenes of Nemesis in the movie, because you have basically an open sort of field to do whatever you want with him,
Mm,
well, the movie kind of sucks. It's,
it does.
it definitely gives you more of a view of Nemesis, and
Sure,
yeah,
sure. Okay. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I like Nemesis as an idea, and this character that just won't stop.
yeah.
Terrified me when I was playing it.
Oh yeah,
You just heard the stars, and you just go, "Oh shit,
here he comes
no!"
again. Oh
Um,
no.
because you fight Nemesis several times throughout the game.
Yes.
Nemesis keeps coming back. Um, but yeah, overall, I really enjoyed Nemesis for what it was.
Hmm.
It certainly felt like a shorter game to me, and like I said, the action orientated side of things didn't sit so well with me, but I did overall really enjoy it.
Yeah. No, it's decent. It was a fun game, and I was young playing it.
Mm,
It was, it scared me, man. It scared me. I do like the you get introduced to certain characters at this point as well, like Carlos Oliveira.
yes, Carlos,
Carlos is a great character.
he is.
Obviously helps Jill, finds a
Mm,
vaccine for Jill while she's at the clock tower. Also, only subduing the virus, so it doesn't completely kill the virus again. So I was saying this
yep,
was going to come back up after Sherry. We're literally one title in, and it's happened again.
yep,
Um, but yeah, the railgun.
yes.
If you're gonna kill a boss in a game,
Mm.
you just use a railgun, man.
Railguns are like, across the board, some of the best
Yeah,
weapons in any game.
yeah.
If you find a railgun, odds are it's going to kill what it hits,
Oh yeah, yeah. Including Nemesis in this case. Yeah,
including
yeah.
Nemesis. Yes,
Which partly a shame, but also the satisfaction from that final sort of encounter is ridiculous. It's so good.
it's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a great climax to the game for sure.
yeah. The adrenaline, man. Oh.
Hmm.
Yeah. So then, what happened in Resident Evil One with the mansion? History repeats itself, and
Hmm.
Raccoon City goes boom boom.
It does indeed go boom boom.
We didn't see that coming, did we?
No, no, not at all. Yeah, so to contain the virus and hide and cover up everything, they blow up Raccoon City. Goodbye, Raccoon City. We'll be
Yeah.
back with you in one game's time.
Yes. The only details that actually leak to the general populace of the world and to the media at this point is that Umbrella is in some way involved in what happens to Raccoon City. They don't actually find out what happened,
No,
just that Umbrella are at fault.
yes,
That's it.
and that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
You killed an entire city.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite the move. So much so, in fact, that the U.S. government comes down hard on Umbrella
Yes.
and forbids it from doing business in the US and federalizes all its assets.
Mm. Which is interesting.
Yeah, so now it's owned by the government.
It's now owned by the government.
Hmm.
Yes. So,
So,
3 months after the events of Resident Evil 2, and alongside the destruction of Raccoon City in Resident Evil 3, we get to Code Veronica.
a personal favorite of yours, if I
A
recall.
personal favorite of mine for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I love the Dreamcast, and I absolutely loved Code Veronica.
Mm-hmm.
Follows Claire Redfield and Chris. Chris is finally back in their efforts to survive a viral outbreak on both a remote prison and a research facility in
Yeah,
Antarctica.
I
So the remote prison is in the Southern Ocean, and the research facilities in Antarctica.
yeah. So I wrote a little bit of a song for you on this one, Durs.
A song?
It's more of a jingle, so I'll give it to you
Go
now.
on.
I'll give it to you now really quick. So it goes brother and sister versus brother and sister in the snow.
That was terrific.
There we go.
I'll try and add some music to that later.
Yeah. Like and share, guys. Like and share.
Like and share. Yeah, smash that like button. So
Sorry, mate.
Claire is part of like she's like anti-Umbrella group tries to break into their labs, I believe, in Paris, from what I remember, and then ends up in Umbrella's run prison island in
Rockford Island.
Rockford Island, thank you, in the Southern Ocean, and helicopter crash causes zombie outbreak, and here we are. Resident Evil Code Veronica is by far the hardest Resident Evil game that I'm aware of. It is a tough game.
Okay.
We finally move away from the pre-rendered CG backgrounds into full 3D environments for the first time in the Resident Evil series, the main series anyway. Yeah. And this actually, I think, benefits the game. Although obviously it doesn't look as photographic as the others did. Once we get to the Dreamcast, we've got the power there to make these games look really good in 3D, full 3D. So we have full 3D environments. It's still very much a static camera affair, still got the tank controls, it's still very much traditional survival horror, but what we do get is this wonderful more cinematic feel to the game. We have pans and zooms and sweeps with the camera that we just can't do with pre-rendered.
There is a nice depth to it.
There's a nice depth, and that slight movement of the camera, with the camera panning down or kind of zooming in or sweeping across, it just adds to that cinematic feel to Resident Evil Code Veronica. So did you play Resident Evil Code Veronica? I don't think you did you?
I didn't. I've cheat sheeted myself for this one, Durs. I have gone away. I've watched.
Well, that's fine. I mean, we can't play every game.
Yeah, I've gone away. I've watched a bit of gameplay to get a feel for how it runs.
Yeah.
And I've sort of looked through the highlights of the plot of the game and things like that as well, just to keep myself clued in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. So I mean, only to say that I do think that Resident Evil Code Veronica stands up as a far better Resident Evil 3 than Nemesis. I think Nemesis is great as a spin-off, action-orientated spin-off, but for me, the true Resident Evil 3 will always be Code Veronica. Great game. It was originally on the Dreamcast, but did find its way to most consoles. I think it was on the certainly on the PlayStation 2. You got Code Veronica X, and I think they've done some awful remasters recently, which I don't think were terribly good.
Okay. So in this one, you've got a bit of a paradigm shift, haven't you, where Claire in 2 was looking for Chris.
Yes.
And now you have Chris trying to find his sister Claire.
Yes.
If I've sort of looked into that correctly.
That's right. So this originally is actually, I think you're right. I think Claire is originally trying to find Leon. Trying to find Chris, and breaks into a facility where she gets caught and sent to the prison.
Yeah,
she's trying to locate Chris. And then the other half of the game is Chris trying to find Claire, which is
yeah. So he runs into Wesker again.
Shock horror.
Yeah, they haven't seen each other for a little while.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, like a couple of months. And at this point, Wesker is actually sort of kind of joined the organization, as they're known. So he's actually gone into, so from Umbrella, he's now with almost what's more of a mysterious evil.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just known as the organization. We don't really know anything about them at this point, but Wesker's doing something for the organization or with the organization, and sort of is dispatched on the HQ of Alfred Ashford, which is on Rockford Island, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is where all these characters start to sort of come together again.
Yeah. Like I said, and I think the story of this one actually does make it feel like the true successor to Resident Evil 2. It furthers the story. There's not much story that gets furthered in Nemesis, other than the city blows up, which fine. That's about it, really.
Yeah, I think Nemesis is it is like these things were also happening whilst these things were happening in 2, and then after 2 we we blow up Raccoon City, basically is what happened there. It is a bit sort of in and out of the time loop, isn't it? And
it's very much a spin-off.
Yeah, and then when you get to Veronica, I can see now the story's going forward in a slightly different way. So we're starting to see more of the clones, and
Yes. Yeah.
that side of the scientific warfare that's being worked on across the world.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's definitely, again, it's increasing that universe. It's making the scope a lot bigger, and you're starting to meet people like Alexia, who, like, let's be fair, like Alexia is for the, what would she be at this point? She's like 25.
Something like that.
She's been in stasis for like 15 years.
Hmm.
So a 25-year-old genius clone, um, basically hell bent on evil.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much.
Like she's a good antagonist. I really
She
like
is.
Alexia from what I've seen, and it is one of the games that I need to go and play.
I think you'll have a great time playing
Yeah.
through it. Yeah.
I think the reason I didn't play it early on was because I never had a Dreamcast.
Yeah.
I had a friend who had a Dreamcast,
Hmm.
but he was stuck playing things like Project Gotham Racing and stuff like that. So
Sure. Fair enough.
never really touched on Code
I
Veronica.
would say that I think Code Veronica is probably the best looking game on the Dreamcast.
Yeah,
Of the games I own, I would say hands down, Code Veronica is the best looking one.
I think you know what's really weird with it though is when I saw certain things on the Dreamcast from that friend of mine, Dan, if you're listening, it's been about 20 years, mate. I hope you're all right. Um, um, I thought certain things like reflections,
Hmm.
like I say, Project Gotham Racing, when he was playing that game, playing in the nighttime, driving through say Tokyo or whatever it was,
Mm.
and you got the reflections of like street lights on the paint of the car, things like that. I thought the Dreamcast was a massive step up in terms of
I
graphical abilities.
I think the Dreamcast. I don't remember Project Gotham Racing being on the Dreamcast, but it probably was. I wasn't a
Yeah,
big racing fan,
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, it did do a lot of things. I think better than
yeah,
its competition. It just failed in a few key areas, and unfortunately, by that point, Sega had kind of given themselves a bad rep with a lot of games companies, and the big sports companies like EA basically refused to play ball with them. So as a result, the console kind of failed. But it is a wonderful console. Still has games being made to this day for it, and a rabid fan base still out there. So yeah, great, great. Yeah, and you're right. It did do reflections and things like that very well.
I um I put my hands up, Durs. I used the wrong title. I was triggered by the fact that you said you don't remember it being on the Dreamcast. And I was like,
I thought it was an Xbox game, wasn't it? Project
yeah,
Gotham.
I was like, was it Project Gotham? It was Metropolis Street
Oh,
Racer.
I loved Metropolis Street Race. Yeah, I remember
Yeah,
that game. I
that's
do
that's
remember
what
that.
it was, and it
Yeah.
was beautiful. But yeah,
Yeah.
back to the point.
Yes, back to Resident Evil.
So Chris versus Alexia
Hmm.
in order to rescue Claire. The stakes are high.
Absolutely. Um,
Uh,
and
how did
bear
it
in
go
mind,
for you?
we've had several games now, or at least one game, where Chris has been completely missing, and Claire's been desperate to try and find him. Now, she finally has, but unfortunately, she's about to die.
Yeah.
So take us through what happens, Daz. In the canon, anyway.
So
I'm trying to like not give away too much of the actual plot. I like us discussing the
yeah,
story, but what happens in the games, I'm kind of like, oh, I kind of want people to play them and find out.
yeah. So Chris is obviously in Antarctica.
Yes.
And when he gets there, he encounters Alexia.
Yeah.
I, for my sins, have not seen this boss fight.
Okay.
All I know is that Chris wins at this moment in time. So if you
Well,
could be, if
I
you
mean,
if you've got more in-depth analysis or
no, it's an incredible boss fight. A lot of the boss fights in Code Veronica are really really fun. The weapons you get in the game are a lot more. I think a lot more fun to use as well, which kind of adds to that. But you're right, Chris does win, assuming you're not terrible at the game.
yeah, I mean he's got to win at some point, right?
Yeah, eventually, if you
I
play
mean
long enough.
you can replay, but so yeah, Claire, who is about to die,
Mm,
is rescued.
she is indeed.
I'm very, very, very happy with that because Claire, again, is, she's in my top three.
Um, ooh, nah.
Nah.
I don't know. I kind of feel like if I had to order, it would probably be Leon, Jill, Chris, Claire. So I think she'd be 4. I
Ooh.
think she'd be my 4.
I swap. I swap Claire with
Jill.
Joe. Joe,
Fair enough.
basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah. I it's
They're all great. I mean, they're
yeah.
all great characters. I love all these characters. So
Yeah, of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool. Daz,
Yes.
let's forget about what happens next. Let's go all the way back to Resident Evil
Zoop, 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 zoop.
in 2002. It's the Resident Evil remake.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Probably, in my opinion, the most faithful, incredible video game remake of all time.
Yeah.
Until we get to Resident Evil 2 remake, which is also probably equally as good.
It's pretty badass.
It's pretty awesome. So what we have here is a fully faithful recreation of the Spencer Mansion and a fully faithful recreation of Resident Evil 1, released for the GameCube and looking absolutely gorgeous. We're returning to pre-rendered CG backgrounds in incredible detail. Almost photorealistic. Certainly, when you get to the remastered version of this game, it is pretty much photorealistic, oozing with atmosphere, and it's just one of the best remakes ever. I cannot tell you how great it feels to play the Resident Evil remake. It's one of the few times Resident Evil is one of the few times where I can honestly say, if you want to play the remakes, I haven't played 3, so I can't say about Nemesis, but if you want to play the remakes of the first 2, they're fine. If you wanted to play those over the originals, not such a bad thing, because they're tremendous. And the Resident Evil remake was just really showed what could be done with the GameCube at the time. It's one of probably the best looking game on the GameCube, mainly due to the pre-rendered stuff. Obviously, that helps a lot.
Yeah, man. Yeah. I've looked at stills and things more recently of it, and even the tile work on the floors, man,
it's incredible.
It's
incredible. And the lightning, there's like a storm going on outside. You get the lightning coming through and lighting up through the windows and stuff. It really, seeing it in motion is incredible. Highly recommend checking it out. My only comments on it really is that I wasn't very keen on the movement changes they made in the remasters. I think they tried to make the tank controls a bit easier. So it kind of annoyed me. But apparently you could turn it off. So that may be the way to go.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah, without the tank, when you kind of remove the tank controls in the way that they did, it makes the game far easier than it should be.
Yeah.
But I think you can turn it off. I'm not entirely sure. So then we go back even further.
All the way back.
Way back to the start. Well, not the very start. The start of the games. The prequel to Resident Evil. It is Resident Evil 0, also from 2002. This story follows Rebecca Chambers, a member of Bravo Team, as we discussed during the run-up to Resident Evil. There were 2 teams. There was Alpha and Bravo. Alpha was Chris's and Jill's team, going in to find out what happened to Bravo Team. And in Resident Evil 0, we find out what happened to Bravo Team, the first team to investigate the outbreak.
Yeah. So this is May 1998, which is also, you're kind of, within a few days of Resident Evil, aren't you? So Marcus, who isn't dead, by the way, if you remember at the start when I was giving the rundown, I said that Marcus is sort of discarded of with the Queen Leech by Wesker and Birkin, and they take all his work as their own. They've actually merged. So Marcus and the Black Leech are now a thing.
Yes.
And it is them who actually releases the dogs, the zombie dogs, into the Arklay Hills.
Yes.
And
we see at the start of Resident Evil.
Yeah, so they are the reason for the reports of dog-related deaths and cannibalism.
Yeah,
in the first place. Yeah, so very interesting there, and I think Black Leech going from what was maybe a pear-sized being into what it is now, which is a monstrosity combined
Yes.
with Marcus himself. It's Marcus is a frightening character in himself because he's so determined in his evil ways.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, very interesting.
Mm.
And a nice little prequel chapter to add on to the early story.
It's a great prequel chapter, and an interesting experiment in survival horror and Resident Evil. This is the first game where you have more than one character to control at the same time. You play as Rebecca Chambers, a member of Bravo team, and also convicted criminal Billy Cohen. Billy, and together you explore the abandoned training facility of Umbrella. Interesting to note, there are no item boxes in this game.
Yeah.
None. You must share the inventory between Rebecca and Billy, or chuck the item on the floor and come back to it later.
Yeah.
So it still has that inventory management, but now because you have two characters, you have to juggle the items between the two. Visually, I would say that this is better than the Resident Evil remake. They obviously, whatever they learned from Resident Evil, they improved upon with Zero. Overall, I thought it was a great entry to the series. I am not keen generally, and this is a weird thing that I have. I'm not very keen on playing multiple characters in games. I am, sorry, but I like to play one character at a time. That's how I like to play a game, unless it's a party game. If it's like an RPG and I'm playing as a party, that's fine. I don't generally like escort missions, and this will come up later. And I don't generally like, playing as multiple characters. But in this case, it worked really well.
Yeah.
Because traditionally, I love it when I'm like, okay, I can play as Leon all the way through, then I can play as Claire all the way through. I can play as Chris all the way through, then I can play as Jill all the way through. I want to play as both at the same time. But this does a very good job of managing that. There are more enemies, so it's a lot more difficult without the other person. The AI is generally pretty good, and they're pretty sensible. It works really well, and it's really interesting to see the events that led up to the original Resident Evil.
Yeah. What did you think of the mimic Marcus, where it was basically Leech had sort of taken on the form of Marcus, so to speak, but it was like a floppy sort of bleh.
It's a super creepy enemy, though, that Leech enemy. When it starts to form and stuff, it's really, really cool. You can kind of cheat it if you know, but it's terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just slimy, floppy.
Yeah, you
James
can
Marcus.
it's great. It's a great visual, and like I said, you can exploit it if you leave the room while it's forming and come back in and do all that sort of stuff. But it's a great visual. I love it as a creature. I think it's one of the most original.
Yeah, and very, very, very easily damaged when you know how to.
Yes, absolutely.
Fire. Sorry.
Well, that's quite all right.
Yeah. So, you're Billy and Rebecca.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on Billy, my man? Where are you at with Bill?
I like him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure at first, but I like first of all, I like that Rebecca is sensible enough to be like, yeah, he's a criminal, but we're not going to get out of this unless we team up. And throughout the game, I think, you realize who Billy is, and you come to like him. I like Billy.
Yeah. I mean, he's ex-Marines.
Yes. Oh yeah. He's not like just a He's not. Oh, yeah, sorry, I shouldn't have said. He's not like just a rapist or something. He does have a military background, and he is a nice protagonist to play. He's not a horrible person.
I think the things that with the character, specifically the character model that stick out with me is the handcuff, the constant swinging handcuff. And
I like it.
Have you seen From Dusk Till Dawn?
Of course I have.
Okay.
What kind of a question is that, Daz?
Okay, so you might know where I'm going with his tattoo then.
Oh yeah.
Very, very. Is it Seth? It is Seth, isn't it? From Dusk Till Dawn, played by George Clooney, with that sort of.
It's clearly inspired. Yes.
Yeah, that sort of tribal that goes up the arm towards the neck. Very reminiscent of From Dusk Till Dawn. That.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Billy. I like his hair too.
Yeah, he's got good hair. Good hair. Good hair is key to a good character.
Yeah, of course. Got to be done.
But yeah, so Resident Evil Zero, the prequel to Resident Evil and Resident Evil Remake. Terrific fun.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what to do with these side games. Not sure whether to come back to them after we've gone through the main series. But briefly touch on this one because it's a quick one and it doesn't need much to talk about. We have Resident Evil Outbreak File 1 and File 2, originally conceived of as one game before being split into two. Effectively, you've got Outbreak, and then File 2 is like a glorified expansion, just adding more of the levels that were cut from the original game. It's set generally during Resident Evil 2 and 3, and it follows 8 different characters through several scenarios. It's the first multiplayer game of the series. You can play as up to 4 players online, with each character only having 4 item slots, each making teamwork absolutely key. And you can also swap items if you're very close to each other. So you have to swap items around, but you only get 4 item slots. The only reason I'm kind of breezing over this one, there's no real story, to be honest. You get to see some interesting stuff. Like I think you get to see the what happens to the STARS team in the police station before Leon turns up in Resident Evil 2. You get to see some of that. But generally, there's not much story to be had here. One really interesting feature was the virus meter. So you will get turned into a zombie slowly with a countdown, after which you can start attacking players.
Yeah,
which is kind of a cool mechanic. But yeah, no particular real story here, and you can't really play it anymore because it was online only, and I don't think the servers are up anymore. So you can play single player, but it's nowhere near as good. Multiplayer is the way to play Outbreak if you can, but I don't think you can. So, moving on to Resident Evil 4. Leon Kennedy, now working for the government, is sent on a mission to rescue the US president's daughter, Ashley, who has been kidnapped by an evil cult.
Los Illuminados.
Absolutely. In a rural part of Europe, Leon fights hordes of villagers inflicted by a mind-controlling parasite and reunites with Ada Wong, who we completely ignored in Resident Evil 2.
Oh, Ada, sorry. So just to give a bit of background, Ada is a spy.
Well, she is in the remake, isn't she? She's
yeah. So basically, she works for Wesker, doesn't she? She's basically sent to try to get a.
Yeah.
Is it in 2 that we skip past her?
Yeah.
Or is it 3? It is 2, isn't it?
She meets up with Leon because Resident Evil 4 is when she reunites with Leon.
Yeah. Yeah, so she meets Leon whilst, and she kind of betrays him, doesn't she, trying to get a sample of the virus?
Yes, yeah.
So that's kind of like a little bit of backstory on her.
That's where we are with that. Yeah, sorry about that. But so we're in this this rural part of Europe, and there are no more zombies, Daz. No more zombies. We are fighting Los Ganados, which apparently is cattle in Spanish.
Yeah. Is that what that means?
Yeah. Oh. They're the villagers who have become host to Las Plagas, which is plague in Spanish. Yeah. It's a parasite. So we are talking about parasites now, and we talked about the T virus almost mimicking a parasite in the way it was behaving before, but here we have confirmed parasites.
Yes, we do. Amazing. I love a parasite. I don't know about you, but
I love a good parasite, me. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Give me a ringworm any day.
Absolutely. So tank controls are out the window. We are moving into the action era of Resident Evil, the action period. No more zombies, faster, more intelligent enemies, and an over-the-shoulder camera, which has become the staple for the most part of the genre going forward. Yes. So the Los Ganados, they're not zombies. They are infected with a parasite, and as a result, they are more intelligent.
Yes.
They will climb ladders. They will use weapons. They will dodge your attacks. It's a massive departure from the zombies of old.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. They are for somebody who went into Resident, like I mentioned this during the horror podcast.
Yeah, we did touch on a few of these in the horror podcast. Yeah.
I was late going into Resident Evil 4. It was, I think it was Xbox 360 sort of era.
Sure.
Yeah. They're scary, man. When you first,
they are.
It's like not what you're used to at all, and it's like, oh, all right, okay, I really need to move.
Yeah.
But
so
also,
I picked this game up with my GameCube. I bought a GameCube for this game.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Amazing. And there's us talking a couple of weeks ago about how whether or not we should buy VR for maybe a Resident Evil release or something like that. But you've actually bought hardware for Resident Evil previously.
I mean, it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I knew there would be other games on that console that I wanted.
Yeah.
But yeah, Resident Evil 4 was it was a console seller for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why. Again, these murderous, dexterous
villagers,
very mobile villagers, as scary as they are, you still stop to shoot.
You do. In this game, you still have the old cannot run or move while shooting mechanic from Resident Evil of old, which I will admit does help lend itself to the horror aspect of the game.
It definitely adds to the difficulty curve as well.
It does.
Yeah.
The aiming for the most part is an awful lot better than in previous games, so you do get quite accurate shots. The only problem being if the enemy gets too close to you, at which point the aiming just goes all wrong.
Oh yeah.
But from a distance, yeah, it works very well. I found this game personally, I like the zombies. And I like the survival horror. And this game for me was the first one, maybe Resident Evil 3 to an extent, but that still had the tank controls. It still had the zombies. It still felt more survival horror than action. This one moved to more action with survival horror aspects for me.
Yes.
And I also didn't particularly like the tone of the game. I found the game to be kind of tongue-in-cheek and comical a lot of the time.
There was that too, it wasn't there?
Didn't take itself as seriously as the previous games, which I always liked. You know, for as ridiculous as the Resident Evil series was in plot, I loved how serious they took it.
Yeah.
And this game kind of had a bit of a lighter-hearted edge, which I wasn't keen on.
A little bit of self-awareness and
sure. But I will say the action is terrific when you have it. The shooter mechanics are great for the most part. The action is superb. There's some amazing action set pieces, and it just moves at a breakneck pace.
Yeah. Let's talk chainsaws.
We did. We briefly touched on this in our horror review. Yes, the Chainsaw Man. Probably the scariest thing in Resident Evil 4. If I'm honest.
Yeah, I'm with you there.
Hearing that chainsaw or seeing him for the first time is terrifying, particularly when you realize that it is a one-hit kill with that chainsaw.
Yeah.
I got killed by him so many times when I first played, to the point that I actually ended up exploiting it, where I realized that having the sniper rifle, I could actually start sniping him before it triggers his animation to come and attack me. Once you hit him, he does start running towards you, but it gives you that amount of time that you can you can get him while he's waiting there. But yeah, the Chainsaw Man was a great addition. It was terrifying. I loved it.
So again, for my sins, Mr. Durs, Chainsaw Man is the reason this game is not complete in my repertoire.
Go on.
So just as you say, you died a lot to him before finding the exploit there. I died a lot to him to the point of a rage quit.
Okay, yeah. I can imagine that happened a lot.
Yeah, I did this with the Dark Souls games as well. When I first started playing Dark Souls, I stopped for a very long time with them because I was done with it.
You just get to a point where you're just so fed up with the game. You're like, I'm just not having any pleasure in doing this anymore. I'm done. Yeah, and that's fair enough.
I appreciate Resident Evil 4 as a good title.
It's good for what it is.
Yeah, I appreciate the game. I appreciate where it stands in the canon.
Yeah.
But I did not finish the game because of that. Because of the rage quit.
Fair enough. I've rage quit games before. I can appreciate that.
Again, I'm going back to it. At some point, I'll get there. I'll go back to it. I might make this week when we talk about
The
going
Resident
forward.
Evil week.
I might just make this week my right. You're going to start playing through Resident Evil again. You're going to stop playing Isaac for a while. You've completed Sekiro. Let's go through Resident Evil.
Get that remaster.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I think I need to complete some of these titles, and obviously coming in this podcast, a listener may want us to be as knowledgeable as possible, but we are human. We only have so much.
Well, no, and the whole point of this, I mean, we've had a week to get this together.
Yeah.
We've done what we can, patching together what we haven't. What we don't know with stuff from Wikipedia, but we haven't played all of these games. I know for a start, we've got games like Resident Evil Gaiden, didn't even touch yet, or probably won't touch because I literally haven't played it at all. I've only played one of the Survivor games, so I can briefly touch on it. But for the most part, it's just what we're doing, what we can to get through this series in a deep dive format. But we're doing the best we can. I really enjoyed Resident Evil 4 for what it was. It, for me, moved too far away from survival horror, which I wasn't keen on. But as its own game, I thought it was terrific. It feels like an action horror game that features Resident Evil characters more than it does a Resident Evil game. It feels like it's a game that I've downloaded some downloadable content that adds Leon and Wesker into this game, and then I'm like, okay, rather than this is a Resident Evil game proper, for me anyway. But overall, I loved it. I hate QuickTime events. I hate them, and I still hate them going through this series as it continues. Don't like them. They've got no place in this game. But other than that, I thought it was a great action game, great fun. So do you want to move forward? Where are you with your history of Resident Evil? Are you still continuing through past 4?
So this is pretty much it gets a little patchy at this point with me.
Okay,
so
cool.
Let me just have a quick look where I am.
Yeah, okay. So like I said, Leon fights through the hordes and manages to eventually save Ashley, the president's daughter. I was initially very concerned, being a person who hates escort missions, that this whole game is basically one escort mission. But they did it very well. Ashley is, for the most part, never gets in the way and is never too annoying. So I actually thought she was fine in this game. Yeah.
So a couple of a little bit of characters in the background at the moment that has happened leading up to, obviously, Resident Evil 4, with Leon going to save the president's daughter.
Yes.
You also, during this time, have Wesker actually passing evidence to the US government a little bit earlier. So maybe 6 months before the events of Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
And Umbrella is... Obviously, it's been taken over, but the people like Spencer go into hiding. He's wanted now by the US and Russian governments. And then off the back of that, Chris and Jill establish a bioterrorism security. I can't even say it. Does Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, or BTSA.
Yes.
To combat the global threat of the BOWs, which is the bioorganic weapons. Yeah. So these things have happened. Wesker makes a deal with a company called Tricell to help them build bioweapons if they fund his latest work, which we will come into in Resident Evil 5, I believe.
Yes.
The Ouroboros.
We'll get to that very shortly.
Yeah. Cool. So that sort of fills the gap of what's going on in the background there.
Okay, wonderful. So from Resident Evil 4, we then move on to Resident Evil 5, their first attempt, to my knowledge, of horror in broad daylight, which is interesting. So, as you discussed, Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance agents, Chris Redfield and Shiva, are in Africa following the apparent death of Jill Valentine.
Yes.
So we find ourselves in Africa, which takes us back to something you said earlier. We were in Africa earlier, weren't we, in this retrospective, in the 60s. This is where all of it in terms of the canonical story,
Mm-hmm.
all of it began here. It all began in Africa, and here we are back in Africa.
That's absolutely right. So Chris's aim in Africa is to stop the illegal selling of bioweapons.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So he is there policing the situation.
Yeah.
And this is where we really start to get a look at the antibodies, the T-virus antibodies known as Ouroboros.
Yes.
If I'm pronouncing that correct, which is, it's T-virus related. And yeah, what do we know about that, Durs?
I don't know an awful lot about it. My memory of 5 is somewhat patchy. I did start replaying it about a year ago.
Yeah.
And I found it very fun. It's designed around 2-player co-op. And it actually works really well if you play it alone as well, because the AI is really, really good. Shiva's really good as an AI character. The game looks gorgeous. I think it still looks good today, but for the time that it came out, it looks amazing. I mean, they were really pushing this engine to its limits here.
Yeah.
And the gameplay is just refined. It's Resident Evil 4.2. It really is. It's tweaked and improved. The mechanics are just refined in this one. It's great. Yeah. So in this one, the infected are known as the Mangini. And they're pretty much the same as the Las Plagas zombies, villagers, infected. This game, though, focuses much more, because it's in the daylight. The way they tried to get the horror aspect is just from the hordes.
Yeah.
So we get hordes of Mangini. They swarm you. This kind of works because you've got 2 characters on screen, much like they did with Resident Evil 0, where you added more enemies. But it kind of works because the player count is up to 2 from 1. But yeah, I really enjoyed Resident Evil 5 as, again, the logical next step from Resident Evil 4. We're moving more in an action sense. Horror aspect is minimal in this game, I would say. Not helped by the fact that it's in daylight. It was brave of them to try, but I don't think it really works for me. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I still hate QuickTime events throughout this game.
QTEs are the bane of my life in certain, like the Tomb Raider games that came out the last few years as well. I think they're a bit of a cop out in terms of combat.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought overall it was a fine game for what it was.
Yeah.
I know there was a lot of controversy with this game being racist as well, or supposedly racist.
Yeah.
I really don't share that opinion.
No.
And no one complained when we were gunning down Spanish villagers in Resident Evil 4, so it's a little odd that we're complaining now.
Yeah, I mean, we did, like, a lot of people have died in this game. I don't think they're not picking and choosing. They're just moving the setting around to keep it fresh.
They're moving the setting around, yeah, exactly. and you know, we're in Africa.
So a little bit of Wesker, because Wesker's a big part of this story. So,
he is indeed.
You touched upon Jill and her untimely demise.
Yeah, so in the opening of Resident Evil 5, Jill sacrifices herself.
Yes, so Chris is being badly beaten by Wesker.
Yep.
In almost a Matrix-style scene.
Yes.
And as Chris is on the verge of being killed by Wesker, Jill actually tackles Wesker out of the window. It's Spencer's home in Europe, isn't it? And Spencer, we haven't even mentioned Spencer. He's dead in this scene.
Yes, he is dead.
So they track down Spencer to Europe, Chris and Jill do, and when they get to his sort of bedchambers, Wesker's standing over his corpse.
Yeah.
And that's how the fight ensues, obviously. So Wesker and Jill fall out of the window onto the rocks way, way below.
It's a very, very, very far drop.
Yes, it's hell of a cinematic.
It is, yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's a great opening.
Yeah, and that's what leads us forward then, is the fact that, Jill's dead. But is she Durs?
No.
Simply put.
Oh, come on. How many times has Wesker come back from the dead? Jill's bound to come back from the dead. No, Jill is not dead. And this is something that Chris learns throughout Resident Evil 5.
Yeah. So I take the I don't know if this is specifically what happens in the canon, but what I'm getting from it is Wesker during the fall transports himself using his G virus capabilities that he's learned over the years,
Mm.
transports himself and Jill to the lab in Africa.
Right. I didn't
That
know that, but that may well happen. Yeah, you may well be
yeah,
right. Sounds like
rather
the
than
kind of thing that Wesker would do.
yeah. And then so using basically the aim is because she has dormant T virus in her blood,
As we
he wants
discussed
to create
earlier, yeah.
yeah. So he is looking to take a strain of that to create Ouroboros.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was Resident Evil 5.
Mm.
A generally enjoyable game, and like I said, the natural progression from Resident Evil 4, in my opinion, and continuing in that vein, Resident Evil 6. Um, Here we have multiple characters to play. We play as Chris, we play as Leon, we play as Jake, and we play as Ada. And they are confronting the force behind a worldwide bioterrorist attack. The
Mm.
story is centered around their 4 campaigns, and they're all kind of interwoven. So they quite often cross paths, with each campaign featuring its own unique tone and gameplay style. So some characters, for example, are a lot more vulnerable, leaving you to kind of use more survival horror tactics, while some are more tough and it's more of a sort of run and gun kind of deal. And each character has their own unique abilities as well, which is kind of interesting. Again, for me, it just it further refines the mechanics from 4 and 5. This is pretty much perfected in 6. For all of the shit that Resident Evil 6 gets, I would say they did perfect what they started in 4.
Yeah.
In terms of the action combat, the movement, everything. It's followed the action route to its logical conclusion here, and I think it does it very well. It does it well for what it is. It's pretty much everyone's least favorite in the series, from what I gather.
I get that vibe.
I can see why,
Yeah.
but I also think I gave up with this series being survival horror from 4.
Yeah.
Really, for me. So for this, I was like, it's fine, and I think it's worth playing Resident Evil 6 if you want an action game, or you just want to follow the stories of the characters, because it's kind of interesting seeing what they're up to.
Yeah. Yeah. So we in Resident Evil 6 we actually see the President of the United States become a zombie.
Yes.
Very interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is this remind me? Is this the same president whose daughter was saved from the cult?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't actually know. Resident Evil 6 is the one I've played the least out
Yeah.
of all of these games we're discussing.
Yeah.
I don't actually know. I'm going to assume yes, because I think that makes it more interesting.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. I mean,
don't you think? I think it makes it
yeah.
more interesting that
I think with that as well, it makes it more personal to Leon as well,
yeah.
based on his history and things like that. So yeah, I'll go along with that, Durs. Also, we have a new strain of zombie which are affected with the C virus.
Mm.
Lots of letters before the word virus in this series, but
Yep.
basically,
And they don't
it is
follow any logical order either.
no, not at all. So the C virus is a new fast-acting zombie. So zombie virus, sorry. So it's like literally it will just happen
Mm.
pretty much within seconds. It's like bleh.
Yep.
You can soundbite that noise.
I may do. I may well.
Yeah, for a future thing. Bleh. But yeah, I think the pace obviously is compared to the early games and stuff like that. It's a lot faster paced. As
It's night and day different. Yeah.
yeah, that starts with 4 and sort of builds up. But I think yeah, I again need to play this game.
Yeah,
But-
it is most people's least favorite. I can't say I disagree. But it has its merits, and like I said, if you were going down the action route, then this is fine. It's nice to see Leon in some more, fighting the more traditional zombies in that more traditional environment. But even so, it's pretty much just more of the same that we got in Resident Evil 5 and 4. It's just the logical conclusion of that series.
Isn't this the redemption arc of Ada?
Yes.
It is, isn't it? This is where she sort of sides with Leon and Chris and Jake. But I think Ada's a very interesting character that comes up every now and then. And we can go into her a little bit more if we touch upon the movies a little bit. She doesn't come up as much there, but when she does, it's pretty much the same arc, Yeah. So they were quite faithful with Ada. Very good character.
Yeah, I like Ada. I like Ada's character. I'm sorry I skipped over her during Resident Evil 2.
It's all right. I did it too.
So let's go back.
Let's do it.
Let's go back to between Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5.
Revelations.
Resident Evil Revelations.
Yes.
Following Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield as they try to stop the bioterrorist organization from inflicting the world's oceans with a virus.
So,
sorry.
I was going to say, this is the first time we really see Bassar.
Yes.
Doesn't quite have the same ring as Stars, but it's the first time we really see them in action.
Yeah.
Which is always good.
Yeah. So we are back to a more survival horror focused game. More so than the action found in 4 to 6, although it still has the over-the-shoulder mechanics and it's still quite actiony in places. It does have a return to the survival horror. You do need to be careful with your inventory, manage your ammo. Keeping your distance from enemies is absolutely key. They do tend to rush you, so you need to keep back and, strategically place your character where they can do best. It's got a decent amount of puzzles, and more than anything, I love the ship setting for Resident Evil Revelations. It's got a mansion-esque vibe to it when you're on it. It's got that nice cramped kind of feel. It's really atmospheric, really enjoyable. I loved Revelations. I thought it was really good. The only downside for me is that I really missed the traditional zombies. And I really didn't like the scanning minigame mechanic, which is basically taken from Metroid Prime, but it worked really well in Metroid Prime. It's kind of just annoying here after a while. But overall, I absolutely loved Revelations. I thought it was a really good game.
So I think to keep in mind with this one as well is this happens. So this is Jill and Chris prior to them hunting down Wesker and finding him in Europe, and then Jill taking the tumble out the window. So I
put my notes in the wrong order, which is why we're here now rather than when we should have been.
It's all good. I mean, isn't yours based on release date?
Yes, somewhat. Although I chucked Survivor down at the end, which makes no sense.
It's all good, my man. It's all good. We are not worried about getting things like that mixed up. It's all good because you can always.
We're the third. This is the third podcast in. People already know that this is a total shit show. So it's fine. So I loved Resident Evil Revelations. I didn't play it on the 3DS because I don't have a 3DS. I played it on consoles. When it came to consoles, I had the Wii U version, and really enjoyed it. I really like Resident Evil Revelations. So Daz,
yes,
where's Barry?
Barry,
here he is. We found him. It's Resident Evil Revelations 2. You finally get to play as my boy Barry.
Barry Burton, what a guy.
After all these years, we get to play as Barry in a Resident Evil game. We play as Claire and Barry. Again, this one is now set between Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6.
Yeah.
Claire and Moira, who is the daughter of Barry.
Yeah, Moira Burton.
Are taken to a facility on Seagem Island, I think it's pronounced, where they're attacked by the Afflicted.
Yes.
While an unknown woman, calling herself the Overseer, watches via the cameras and tells them that the bracelets on their wrists record fear. As they try and find safety. Meanwhile, 6 months later, Natalia, who is a new character to the series, takes Barry to investigate what happened to his daughter Myra.
Yes.
Much the same as Revelations 1 in terms of gameplay. It's got a slightly weaker plot, in my opinion. I didn't actually finish this one, but it the plot seemed a lot weaker from what I saw. But it's still got some great moments, and it's really nice to be kind of more character driven in this one. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I haven't touched upon this one as much as I'd like to. It's good to see Barry back as always.
It's always good to see Barry. Yeah. I just wish they had the same voice actor for Barry. Just keep him. They should have kept the original voice actors for all of those original characters, so that even now, when we're like, Chris turns up in Resident Evil 7 and we're like, everyone's a serious voice actor, but we've still got the same original actor playing Chris. Just
that would be hilarious. That would be so funny.
There should be like a DLC for that.
Oh yeah.
Where you can just install that, and the original voice actor's done all of the voices throughout the Resident Evil games.
I mean, there's got to be a mod, right?
There probably is somewhere. Yeah. So yeah, Resident Evil Revelations 2, a really fun game.
Yeah, a nice add into the series. Again, something that the Revelation games I haven't really played, but want to. I'm always keen to get into things that I've missed previously. So
I highly recommend Revelations 1, and Revelations 2 is pretty good as well. Cool. You also get to meet who the Overseer is. It is.
Is it
Wesker's sister?
Oh,
yeah. They pulled that right out of their ass.
Well, we used a female voice, and now it needs to be female. So Wesker's sister. Kind of how that board meeting went, right?
Yeah. Done. Fine.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed Revelations 2.
Good stuff. So guess what, Durs?
What?
We've reached a certain point.
We have reached the end of the action era.
We have.
That's what we've done. We're returning to survival horror with a game that looks really weird. You see the trailers and you're like, it's first person. It looks like it's got nothing to do with Resident Evil.
Yeah.
What is this?
This is Resident Evil 7 Biohazard.
Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Following Ethan Winters as he searches for his wife in a derelict plantation occupied by a cannibal family called the Baker family.
So they said deep in Louisiana.
Yep.
And his wife Mia is clearly the aim of the game. So it's very much for me,
and clearly fucking terrifying.
Oh yeah.
There's that scene.
Which one?
The first one for me is that first initial one when she turns. That I'm like, oh god.
Oh yeah, is that the chopping the arm off?
Yes, I think it's that point, isn't it?
Is it chainsaw?
I just remember because you're following her around before she changes, and then all of a sudden it's like, holy shit.
Yeah. She cuts his hand off.
Yeah. It is, isn't it? It is that point. I know you lose your hand a few times if you're not careful, and a leg if you're not careful, which I wasn't.
So the Baker family.
Yeah, I love them.
Yeah, this is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of Resident Evil games.
It is,
for a long time.
Yeah, it is, and it can be really off-putting when you first play through it. You're like, this isn't Resident Evil. Like, what is going on? But the more you play it, the more you come to realize that this is, without a doubt, the most faithful Resident Evil game since Resident Evil 2.
Yeah,
it is Resident Evil through and through, and as you progress through the plantation and the buildings within the plantation, it becomes more and more Resident Evil feeling.
Yeah, I'm with you there, buddy.
What did you think when you first played it?
I was still right. I know it's a different series, but I was still hyped off the back of PT.
Sure.
Which obviously was a few years earlier, but that sort of horror was something I really wanted to be a part of because I didn't get Silent Hills. And when I saw the trailer, first of all, I was like, "Holy shit, this is going to be amazing!" I
Yeah.
didn't care about the story. I cared about the horror
Oh, same.
of the
I
game.
will say my misgivings about the story aside, I
Yeah,
was just so happy that we were back to survival horror. That's
yeah,
all that mattered to me. I was hyped.
yeah. And then let's talk inventory management as well. So when you get into the game, you realize that you've got your 12 slots. So you're back in a grid-based system,
Yep.
which you can expand by, it's sort of like a leveling up process, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, you've got first person. You're in their home. You're in the
You
home
are.
of these
You're
of
in the
this
home.
scary ass Baker family.
They've got some dead crows in the fridge.
Yeah, it's terrifying, my dude. Like every room that you go into, you're just like, oh my God, what now?
Pipes, and the gross factor
Mm,
is high in this one.
yeah,
Flies everywhere, gone off
yeah,
food, dead things, bits of meat
yeah,
rotting in sinks, and
yeah,
grime everywhere. I love the look of this game. I absolutely
yeah.
adore it.
It feels like if you touch
Talking about it now, I can guarantee you, next week we're going to be like, "What have you been playing, Durs?" And I'll be like, "Resident Evil 7." Because
yeah,
just talking about it now, I'm like, "Oh, I want to get back into this world again."
yeah,
By the way, this is one thing that I don't know about you, but I'm terrible for playing games. So when we do these things every week, it's almost going to be guaranteed that I will have been playing a different game because I just bounce around
yeah,
between games all the time.
yeah,
But yeah, Resident Evil 7 is. I really
yeah.
want to get back into that at some point.
So one point I'd like to bring up on Seven, which again touches on something we did in the horror episode, was talked about VR.
Yes, there is a VR port.
There
There is a
is,
VR version of this game, which must be
yeah,
fucking terrifying.
yeah. I'm not doing that.
No, no, I'm not down with
Not
that.
not right now anyway. I think what would be a good idea for me would be to play the hell out of the game, remember every nook and cranny of the game,
And then do it.
and then do it when you're like, okay, I'm going to be jump scared now.
Yeah, but
um,
yeah. I suppose
yeah.
that could work.
But the Baker family and the way that they sort of morph
Yeah.
throughout the plot as well, it becomes more and more apparent that hold on a minute, these are bioweapons.
Yes.
This
Yeah, it starts
family,
off as if they're just a redneck cannibal family,
yeah,
that are quite insane. But it very quickly becomes apparent that they have been afflicted by some kind of virus.
hmm
Mm.
yeah. So, how many times did what's the dad's name? Is it Jack?
Uh,
Yes,
Something like that.
Jack Baker, I think it is, isn't it? How many times did he sort of kick your ass?
Oh, loads.
Yeah.
Loads
Uh,
and loads. I mean, to be honest, at first, again, and I know I said this last time, I had the same problem with Resident Evil 2 Remake initially. I was still thinking, Resident Evil's become an action franchise.
hmm
So I tried fighting him when I saw him. I thought, oh, this is a boss battle. Off we go. Didn't go
Yeah.
well. Didn't go well. Even when I had him in the garage, I died several times in the garage trying to defeat him with that boss battle there initially.
Yeah.
Kicked my ass, and you quickly realize that against the Baker family, guns are worthless. You know,
Yeah.
shooting him with the pistol is just a waste of ammo.
Yeah.
To be
So,
honest.
so Maya, how are we
Mm.
saying that? The
Oh,
wife,
look, pick one. Go with Maya.
Maya. Okay. So Maya, obviously we talked about her sort of changing, coming in and out of herself.
Yeah.
So that is all sort of part of the Eveline um, E001 operative, isn't it? She's basically been tested on um, and sort of developed as this mid-level. She can be good, can be evil, but she can't
Yeah.
control the evil.
Yeah, and I really felt for them because
hmm
I think the voice actors are so good at this point in the series that I believed that Ethan really loved Mia or
Yeah,
Maya, and you wanted to save her. I wanted to save her. You know. was like, I want to get her cured, even though she's fucking terrifying. And whenever I see her, I'm like, is she going to change into some mental bitch again? I don't know.
Please be nice.
Please be nice. But I loved it. And I love the choice you get towards the end of the game, which I won't spoil.
Yeah, but let's not do that one. Yeah.
I'm not going to spoil it. I'm just saying I really like that.
Yeah.
And I'll leave it at that, because I think people need to play through this game and see what happens.
It is a very, very recent game. You know, it's only sort of 2.5 years old at the moment, nearly 3 years old. So
it feels very new to me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think let's not go over the ending as such. No. Maybe if we mention maybe an honourable mention for somebody who shows up in the game, though.
Sure. The end.
Do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will say that yes. This does tie directly into the Resident Evil franchise. If you read the documents and you get up to date with everything that happens in the game, it happens in the universe. Absolutely, it's not apparent to begin with, but as you go through the plantation, you quickly realize this is connected to the wider Resident Evil universe. The monsters, you do get some monsters in the game. It starts to feel much more Resident Evil. It's not just the Baker family that you're contending with, and in the end, you do meet Chris Redfield.
Yes.
And amazingly, once you've completed the game, there is some free DLC featuring Chris Redfield. And I highly recommend that people play through it. It's tremendous.
Yeah, I haven't actually touched on the DLC.
Oh, it's really good. It's really good.
But...
Yeah, it's really good. I highly recommend that one. You get to play as Chris. It's good.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
It adds more to it makes it feel more and more like it's part of the greater, wider Resident Evil universe. It's terrific. Yeah. I have really nothing to complain about with this game, if I'm honest. I really don't. I know. I'm sure people have things they don't like, but for me, this was the true return to Resident Evil as a survival horror series. I love this game.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. I'm a big fan. I would like to now play the DLC. There's a lot of things I want to play after this discussion, Durs.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen going forward is every week when you ask me the question, what have you been playing this week?
You would have been playing something.
It's going to be some form of Resident Evil game.
Forever.
For probably about 3 to 4 months minimum. So I will be making that my sort of personal project to get back through them all. Kind of falling in love with the story a little bit while researching this podcast and you know, making sure that we have enough to talk about this, you know.
We definitely have enough to talk about.
Yeah. I apologise for any dogs you may be able to hear in the background. They are beyond my control.
It's all right. It sounds
2 floors away. Okay,
I think we're okay.
Good stuff. So, shall we talk movies for a little while, just to touch on those?
Well, yes. Shall we just briefly touch on... before we do, and before we touch on this, let's just quickly... like I said, we didn't cover every single game in the series. There are other games in the series. Like I said, there's Resident Evil Gaiden. There's Resident Evil Survivor, where you play as an amnesiac who's basically trying to uncover his identity. It's like a first-person shooter, which apparently, interestingly, Resident Evil was originally planned as a first-person game. So interesting. So it was the first first-person shooter-esque game in the Resident Evil franchise. And had light gun mechanics if you lived here or in Japan, but not in America. They removed it because of the Columbine massacre.
I see.
The game, honestly, from my experience, the story was rubbish and the controls were pretty terrible. So it was a forgettable game. But I am told that 2 and 3 improved on that. Survivor 2 and 3. I never played them, so I can't say. We also had some on-rail shooters coming out for the Wii. I forget what they were called. Those were pretty good. I think it was Umbrella Chronicles was one of them.
Yeah.
Those were good fun. Dead Aim was another one as well. I always enjoy light gun games, and I know you do because you have an absolute love for House of the Dead 2.
Yeah.
Really enjoyable. But like I said, we're not covering every single game. It's you know, we haven't played all of them, and I think for some of them, like I've played them, you haven't, or you've played them, I haven't. But when it comes to games like Resident Evil Gaiden, neither of us have played it.
Yeah.
So it would be a bit disingenuous to try and pretend like we've played it or something like that. We haven't. It looks interesting though. I like the look of the way it kind of works. It's kind of weird when you it's kind of top-down isometric kind of game, but then it goes into a first person, and then you've got like a moving cursor at the bottom, and you have to hit the right target on the cursor as it moves left to right to hit the target that you're trying to shoot. It's kind of interesting. But those aside, I think before we do talk on the movies, which we're going to get to finally, we did discuss it in the horror games, but Resident Evil 2 Remake we should probably touch on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just to say that it's amazing.
Resident Evil 2 Remake, if you have not played it,
play it.
Do it right now.
If you haven't played the original Resident Evil 2, play it.
Yeah.
If you have played the original Resident Evil 2 and you love it, play it.
Yeah.
It is the biggest love letter to Resident Evil 2. And I honestly went into Resident Evil 2 Remake just terrified that it was going to be awful.
Yeah.
It is superb. I couldn't have asked for a better remake of Resident Evil 2. I would happily, like I said, it's very rare that I say this with remakes, both in films and in games. But honestly, if you wanted to play Resident Evil Remake rather than Resident Evil on PS1, I understand, and I think it's fine. It works fine. And the same goes for this. If you want to play Resident Evil 2 Remake instead of Resident Evil 2, as much as I love Resident Evil 2, it's tremendous. It's well worth playing through. I love it.
Yeah. No matter which way you do it with those, you still get everything that you need from it.
You do.
There's so much to say about, a successful remake. The amount of fails that you've seen over the years of remakes, first of all, is the amount of disgruntled fans who are looking for their hit of nostalgia in the modern era, and just walking away from the game being like, I'm never touching it again. Resident Evil 2 does so much justice.
It's terrific.
Not only to the original Resident Evil 2, but to the whole series. It's beautiful. And if from 7 and the remakes of 2 and Nemesis, if that's the way this series is going, my man, I'm excited for what's to come.
So am I. I absolutely loved Resident Evil 2 Remake. One aside, because I know we're only briefly touching on this, but I found a really interesting YouTube video this week. I was just looking up Resident Evil stuff just in preparation for this, and I found a video, and I will try and find it and send it to you. I'll have to go back through my YouTube history to find it. This guy had modded, obviously using the PC version. He'd put Leon in certain rooms around the house.
Okay.
And then he took the camera away from the character and just moved the camera around, free roaming the camera around the building.
Okay.
To prove, which I think is awesome, it's not just sound effects. Mr. X really does search rooms, even the rooms you're not in. When you hear Mr. X above you, he is actually above you in the game. It's not just sound effect. The actual character is searching through rooms for you, and he systematically searches through rooms looking for you, even when you're not in the room, which I think is
incredible.
Awesome. That just makes the game so much cooler. They did find that if you were in a room that was miles away from where he was, he would teleport to you. I think because the game only renders so many rooms nearby. But yeah, what a cool finding. It kind of makes the game even more awesome when you know that he is actually doing the searching. It's not bullshit. He's actually doing it. And I suspect this is the same with Resident Evil 7, because I was going to say the Baker family definitely inspired Mr. X.
Yeah.
Because you hear the Baker family walking around the room and, searching for you and all of that stuff. And that mechanic transferred tremendously into Resident Evil 2 Remake.
Yeah, I think Mr. X is one of those characters where I think it can be a bit hit or miss for people, all right?
It annoys me in places. I love him in most places.
Yeah.
But some places it does get annoying.
But I mean, it just adds that extra element of urgency and fear, man.
I was terrified when I was... Yeah. It adds a whole new element to puzzle solving when he's stomping towards you. It makes every puzzle feel like you need to hurry the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved it. Neither of us have played Resident Evil Remake Resident Evil Nemesis remake, have we? So
no, I've watched some streams.
yeah, I've watched some stuff.
Yeah,
Doesn't sound like it was quite as tight, unfortunately.
Yeah, it looks good, as you'd expect.
Yeah,
You know, having recently come out, it looks good, but it doesn't have that same sort of panache that the Resident Evil 2 remake had for me.
Sure, but that's where we are, up to date with Resident Evil games. One side note before we move on to movies: there is a Resident Evil big announcement coming in June, early June.
Is there?
And the rumor is that it's going to be Resident Evil 8.
No.
What do you want from Resident Evil 8? If it is 8, if it's 8 instead of a remake of 4 or a remake of something else, if it's an actual Resident Evil 8, what do you want?
I would
because we've had everything here. This series has gone all over the place. So what do you want from a Resident Evil 8? What would you hope for?
I would love for nothing more. Keep the first person.
Yeah, I agree. It's so much more immersive, and there's a mod. I think I said in the horror one. There's a mod for Resident Evil remake, Resident Evil 2 remake, to put it in first person, and it changes the whole game. It's even more scary.
First person survival horror.
Yep.
Bring me my love characters in one way or another. They don't have to be there for the whole game, but you know, like Chris appears in 7. If you're going to throw Leon at me, maybe for a little while, even if he's just an NPC, man, just to keep that universe there.
I think the universe they've built is great, and I think it would be a crying shame if they dropped all of that.
Absolutely. Let me have that.
Do you want to play as one of them?
Maybe for some chapters, but it would be nice to have a new protagonist.
Yeah. The thing I really liked about Ethan in Resident Evil 7 was that he seemed really helpless.
Yeah.
Whereas when you get to like Chris and Leon, you're like, especially Chris, you're like, I am a fucking tank. Like, you know, there's not much that's going to threaten you. If you put Chris in the Baker family residence, he'd just kick their asses.
You know what would be really funny, right? Is if you, because we were talking about this yesterday, a bit of an inside joke between me and you of how they portrayed in the early 2000s the character of Rain in the movies.
Yes.
Michelle
Rodriguez. Michelle Rodriguez playing Michelle Rodriguez. It's the one character she did throughout the late 90s, early 2000s. Same. It's for me. Oh, fuck it. Yeah. So Resident Evil 8's coming out. Let's move on to the movies.
Let's put Rain as the main character in Resident Evil 8.
Oh, no.
That's what I'm getting at.
No.
It's a joke, mate. I don't want that.
I know. Yeah. So I agree. I don't know what they're going to do, but I'm excited because their recent track record has been tremendous.
Yeah. I think a fire has been lit under the arse of the developers, and
this new engine is just so good.
Yeah,
the engine they've developed for Resident Evil 7 and then perfected in the remakes is amazing. Really excited to see what they do next.
Seeing Raccoon City in that engine is just so beautiful as well. It's like it's so big. It's so big.
It is. It's expanded. It feels like a real world. Everything you imagined in Resident Evil 2 is there in Resident Evil 3. Is there in the remake.
Yeah, okay.
I would say, given how smoothly the PC mod works for first person, I hope the next game takes that mod and puts it into the game so that I can choose between third person and first person.
Yeah.
I'd like the option now.
Yeah. I play them both as well. I would
playing Resident Evil remake, Resident Evil 2 remake in first person was a completely different experience to playing Resident Evil 2 as it was.
Yeah,
it's totally different. So yeah, I would love that because I'd play it through again. I'd play it through third person and I'd play it through again first person.
Yeah, absolutely. So
before we go, we're 2.5 hours in. Let's just touch on the movies because we can't leave this podcast without talking about the movies, can we?
No, we can't. So
was this 1999 where this shit show starts?
Is it 1999? I believe it's around that time.
Maybe 2000, don't know.
You know what? It's 2002, Durs.
Is it really? Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Oh, that's way later than I thought.
2002.
2002. Wow, okay.
So, who the fuck is Alice?
Who the fuck is Alice. So Resident, I haven't, I probably have watched all of these movies at one point or another.
Yeah.
I haven't watched any of them for years, but decided last night in preparation for this that I'd watch as many as I could. I managed 3 in a row, and then I needed a break, and I was going to watch more this morning, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it.
Yeah.
Mainly because I had to rent 2 of them. Which pissed me off.
Yeah, like I was looking last night as well. I was like, right, there's a few titles that I need to brush up on.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, Amazon Prime
So
Video. Let's have a look.
Amazon had Resident Evil, so I watched Resident Evil on
Yeah.
Amazon Prime, and then I had to rent fucking Apocalypse and the third one, whatever that's called.
Extinction, yeah.
Extinction. I had to rent both. They were only £2 each, but even so, I was like, oh.
Yeah, you paid £2 to watch that.
£4 to watch. Yeah, for that fucking experience.
I mean, like, basically, plot as it is, you follow Alice,
yes,
who becomes more and more superpowered as the titles go on.
Ludicrously so after after the first one, yeah.
You learn about something called Program Alice or Project Alice, one or the other, which brings you to the fact that she is or isn't a clone, depending on whether she's the original. And they are basically working on a superhuman using the T virus and the G virus as in different measurements to try and build the perfect human soldier. Within this, you do touch upon some of the characters from the game series.
You do, in weird locations where they shouldn't be.
Yeah, so you meet Jill first of all, I believe.
In Apocalypse.
Yes, you meet Jill in Apocalypse after basically a bunch of unknown new characters, no stars whatsoever in the original movie.
No. Do you know, I will say, having watched the first 3 through again, there were a number of things that struck me. The first thing that surprised me was that Resident Evil's okay. It's not a great movie, but it's fine. So right.
I watched that 2 days ago. As a kind
it's not as bad as I remember it being. Honestly, no. I think because my expectations were so low. But the one thing I really liked about the Resident Evil movie, the first one, and the thing that really pissed me off with the sequels, I remember this back in the day, pissed me off, is that you could imagine that Resident Evil, the movie, could have happened within the game's universe because it doesn't really affect anything in the game's universe.
Yeah. So,
and I really liked that about Resident Evil 1. And then they ruined it with the sequel by then fucking it up and having them meet characters, and then it becomes the post-apocalypse, and it kind of goes off. But I really liked that first movie. I was like, oh, this is cool, because it's like, while I'm playing as Chris and Jill up in the mansion, this could be happening down below.
Yeah.
I like that.
So here's one for you. The original movie was originally written by George A. Romero.
I heard that, yeah.
And it was rejected.
Fuck's sake.
Yeah, so then it fell into the hands of Paul W.S. Anderson, who I think for an action series, like I dubbed it yesterday, didn't I, as the Fast and Furious of zombie movies.
And it really is. It's got that early 2000s vibe about it. Like,
yeah. And 100%. it's not just Michelle Rodriguez that causes that. It's
no, not at all.
Yeah. It is very much fast-paced action. In some cases, martial arts. Comes into it. And
by the way, I for the record, I like Michelle Rodriguez. She just fell into a bit of typecasting in the early 2000s. It's one of my. It's something that I these days consider to be one of the most cringy things in the world, and I can't stand watching it in older movies, from particularly the 90s and early 2000s, where if you had a feminist or a strong female character in movies, they just had to be complete bitches for no reason. Just be arrogant, know-it-all bitches, and just it's awful. It's really cringy to watch, and it's aged really badly because these days I feel we do far better with strong female characters than we did. It's just really kind of embarrassing and just you either get the girl from Jurassic Park, like the know-it-all like, I'm a feminist, and having to point out that I'm a feminist every 5 minutes, or you get the complete bitch for no apparent reason. You know, what the fuck is wrong with you? You're just being horrible to everyone. Which Michelle Rodriguez fell into for quite a few movies, unfortunately.
And I think the thing with that is she plays tough really well.
She does. She does a great job.
She's a very strong woman.
She just becomes very unlikable in some of the characters she plays, and you're kind of like, just die. I want you to die.
Yeah, it's like they didn't know how to write that strong female character in a way that she was likable.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And actually, speaking of her and Fast and Furious, I actually think her character in Fast and Furious is far better. Actually, that's a far better character.
I think with that as well, she's got an opposing. So she bounces off Vin Diesel very well.
Yeah.
And romance aside between them, I think that having those two strong characters represent their sort of not only their genders but their agendas.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
well. Yeah. Man, those zombie dogs are outside your house, man. The outbreak is started.
You know, can you?
That's right,
so basically, there's 5 of them, and every time maybe somebody presses the doorbell, that happens.
Crazy. Yeah, that's fair enough. So I liked Resident Evil 1 for what it was, because I liked that it was a side story that didn't affect the main canon of Resident Evil. And imagine if they'd kept that going. That would have been really interesting. We could have had a whole series of films that continued on alongside the Resident Evil games.
So Resident Evil 2 Apocalypse, you meet
Bollocks.
You meet Jill, you meet Carlos Oliveira.
Yeah.
Apart from that,
Carlos has the most ridiculous, over-the-top, retarded introduction in this film. Jumping out of a plane without tying the rope off and shooting a zombie in the head before his teammates manage to tie it to save his life. I actually like the guy who plays Carlos in this. He plays it quite well.
Yeah.
I thought he was fine.
I mean, he's recurring as well, which is good.
He makes it one more movie, I think, unless he comes back later.
I think there might be maybe like there's a weird thing around about the 5th movie where they start looking at all of the different clones and stuff like that.
Oh, okay. So maybe he's back then. I can't remember, but he's got a great introduction.
Yeah.
I like Carlos in Apocalypse. I do not like Jill. She looks like Jill. She is like, she looks exactly like Jill, but she doesn't behave like Jill.
No,
I don't think.
And as you get further into the plot as well, and she sort of gets this scarab-shaped thing on her chest that makes her evil. Evil Jill is just awful.
Yeah.
I think the redeeming factor. There's 2 redeeming factors for me of this whole series. One of them is Alice.
Yeah, I really like Alice as a character, and I like her more as she gets more superpowered. I like how ridiculous she gets. It's cool.
Yeah. By the time you get to like Afterlife and Retribution, sort of 2010, 2012, her sort of abilities have extended to the point where she's just this superhuman badass. Some of the fight scenes between her and my second redeeming factor, which is Wesker, who's obviously a recurring bad guy.
I think he first turns up in Apocalypse and then continues from there.
That's right, yeah. We've completely skimmed over Nemesis in this, but
we'll get to Nemesis and his goofy looking.
But yeah, the thing that makes this series for me, the reason I kept watching title after title, is because of Wesker versus Alice. I thought, the way Mila Jovovich and Sean Roberts play those characters was amazing.
Yeah, they are great, and he plays Wesker as purposely badly as he's portrayed in the games. It's great. He is just basically Wesker on screen.
So a really strange thing that happened in the series as well was that you had the Doctor. That's not, his name has just completely skipped my mind. We've been talking about him for the last couple of hours.
Yeah, the Doctor Birkin.
Dr. Birkin. So they actually took a lot of his character arc and put it into Dr. Isaacs.
They did, yes.
Played by Ian Glenn, who was in Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Who's
a terrific actor, by the way.
Oh yeah, amazing actor. Amazing.
Because he becomes he injects himself, doesn't he, in Extinction, and becomes like this weird creature thing.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a big eyeball though, which is disappointing.
Yeah, that is. But again, he's recurring. He does come back.
Yep.
He is the end big bad, I believe.
Yes.
In the final chapter. So
yeah,
that's good. Yeah. I think that all in all, recurring characters are what keeps this together.
For sure.
I think, obviously, like the introduction later on of Leon. You meet Chris. Carlos sticks around. I know he's there at least until Retribution. It is good that they keep the characters in there. It does kind of make you go away from the game canon a little bit, because these characters shouldn't be where they are when they are.
That's my main issue with the films. If you take them as their own thing, it's fine. But I really liked the idea that it could have been just a side story to the Resident Evil canon. I think that would have been better. A weird thing I noticed yesterday, and I think from memory this continues through the series. It's something that they started with Apocalypse, and they do it, and it's really annoying. From Apocalypse onwards, I think they do it at the end of every single movie. They add a massive hook for the next film.
Yes.
It'll be a big thing. Obviously, in Resident Evil 1, it worked. She woke up, went out in the streets, and it was like, oh, wow, like everything's happened while I was... And that's fine.
Yeah.
But from Apocalypse onwards, they would add some mad fucking crazy thing to make you go, oh my God, I need to see what happens next. Yeah. But you soon realize, as soon as you watch the next movie, the writers didn't know what was next, and they had to write themselves out of the bloody plot hole they write for themselves. Like, there's like, all of a sudden it's like, engage Project Alice, and then she's going to be evil. But then in the next movie, it's like, oh no, I just avoided all that. Don't worry about it. Forget about it. And that barely comes up. It comes up once in the movie, and you can tell they just didn't really think it through. They just wanted a cool ending to the movie. And then you've got like the end of Extinction, I think it is, where it's like, there's now 5 million clones of Alice, and we're all coming for you. And it's like, cool, man, like Alice power. And then in the next movie, they're like, oh, we really fucked up, guys. Let's just kill them all off in the opening scene. They're just all dead now, apart from one Alice again. It's like, for God's sake, why do you keep writing these ridiculous endings?
Just put them all in the pit, basically.
Put them all in the pit. They write all these ridiculous endings to kind of like get you as a hook for the next film. But you know full well when you get to the next film, they'll ditch it. They'll ditch it immediately because it's so ridiculous. They'll just find a way of ditching it and moving on.
Yeah, and then I think, was it Retribution where they did the Rocky 2 thing where they took, I believe, the gunship bit at the end of Afterlife.
Yes.
The whole final scene of Afterlife, which ends on a cliffhanger, and then they replayed the whole. They rewound it, so they played it backwards for you first of all at the start of Retribution, and then they played it forwards again.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, a bit of a Rocky 2 moment there.
Did you watch any of the CG movies? Because I never have, and they look quite cool. I might have to check those out, because I think those might stand a chance of being actually good. Like really good. Because those are just based on the characters we know and love.
Tell you what, though, there's one thing about Resident Evil Retribution that I know you didn't quite get that far this time around, but
no, probably never.
It does include Barry Burton.
It does, yes. I do remember Barry turning up. Yeah, I do remember.
So it's Kevin Durand, who usually plays the bad guy in everything.
Yes.
Playing Barry Burton, and
he's quite a lovable Barry.
Yeah. He does all right.
He does all right,
yeah. But
So I mean, they are what they are. I think they've got some good points and some bad points, but overall, I'm not a huge fan. But certainly the first one was better than I remember, though.
Yeah.
So I'll give them that.
What I'm going to do once this ends immediately, I've just had a quick look while we were chatting about the movie series, and I've got the remaster of Resident Evil.
Oh, the game
currently queued up in my
mate. I think that should
basket.
be the first game that you play in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Do that, yes.
Yeah. So I'm going to start downloading that as soon as we get off this Skype conversation.
Let me know how you get on, and let us know how you get on next week when we come back. So in terms of Resident Evil recommendations for people, I'm going to go with, because I think if you want tank controls, then Resident Evil 2. for sure. If you don't want that, if that's a bit too old for you, or actually, sorry, Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil Remake, which I think is tremendous. In fact, Resident Evil Remake is my suggestion for that, for tank controls. If you don't like tank controls, then Resident Evil 2 Remake. Where do you stand with recommendations?
Okay, so I would say if you want to go the way I'm going and just go through the whole story as it was told, Resident Evil Remake. Let's do that.
For sure.
If you want a super scary, gross-looking, first-person survival horror game, get yourself on Biohazard, Resident Evil 7.
It's tremendous, and you can play that game without having ever played a Resident Evil game. It's fine.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a perfect introduction to the series.
Yeah, and by the time you get to Chris, it's not an issue because it apart from the DLC, it works. It's right there, and it's a question of, okay, who is this guy? Let's go back. Mm-hmm. So I would say, Oh, I nearly fell off my chair. Then if you if you go for either the remake of Resident Evil or Biohazard, I would say you're in for a good journey either way.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Well, Daz, it's been fun. Another episode down, and I guess we'll get that poll out there ready for next week.
Yes.
So, yes, thank you for listening, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and we'll catch you next time.
Have a good one.